whatever it is, $53 for a hot dog or whatever. It's a slightly artificial situation, but they have some very real problems to talk about.
Yeah, and actually two of those real problems, which neither of us mentioned, which probably are going to feature right up top, is peak central banks, but also peak climate change. That is going to be a huge theme this year, with all the delegates descending. And I can't wait to hear all the interviews and all the thoughts on where we go with ESG investing, apart from anything else.
Well, indeed, I do recommend Enda Karen's piece on the terminal, because he talks particularly peak oil as well. I mean, all kinds of peaks in there. But what is the suggestion on the environment that, you know, these deadlines of 2050, which people seem to be coming up with, may all be rather too late. This decade may be the peak for all this, and we may be missing it, because that's clearly a key issue this week. And we'll have lots of great interviews from Davos as well.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, we're going to labour this point, aren't we? Speaking of peaks, we got to records on US and European benchmarks in terms of markets on Friday. Today, US stock and bond markets are closed for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Looking at how Europe is opening up 2 minutes into the open after 4 days of gains, and as I say, a record on Friday. We opened a little soft on the stock 600, down 0.1%. Regional equity benchmarks also shaping up muted to slightly softer. The FTSE 100 is up 0.1%. Some of that could be to do with sterling weakness. CAC 40 and DAX and the IBEX all down by between 1 and 0.2%. The FTSE MIB lower by almost 0.5%. Of course, no cash stock trading in the US, and futures really not doing much at all. Dow, S&P and Nasdaq futures all unchanged after we hit records again on Friday on US benchmarks. The 10-year Treasury yield, of course, no cash trading either. We closed on a 182 handle on Friday. The 10-year bund yield goes nowhere, negative 22. The 10-year gilt yield slipping a basis point and a half to 62 basis points. And for a lot of the Asian session, the pound was the worst performing G10 currency. Taking a look at it now, we're at 129.82, down 0.25 percentage point. We get labour market data tomorrow, and towards the end of the week, we get PMI data, manufacturing services and composite, which some say might be really crucial in terms of the pricing around BOE rate cut this month. The market currently putting about a 70% probability on that, and the pound coming under that further pressure after retail sales data on Friday as well. And then got to talk about oil, because double whammy of concerns around supply disruptions in Iraq and Libya pushing oil higher, not by a huge amount. WTI up 0.9%, 59.08. Brent crude at 65.54, up 1%.
Well, let's pick up on that issue about oil, because it's very much what's at the top of our list when we're going to what stocks are to watch this morning. And Bloomberg's Joe Easton has joined us here in our London studio. So, Joe, first of all, oil, as we said, as Nero is saying, having a bit of a reaction, not only what's going on in Libya, but also in Iraq. How's it looking on the markets?
That's right. So we've had this double hit to oil, as Naira mentioned, and we are seeing stocks in the oil sector rising today. So the likes of Tullow Oil and Saipem in Italy, who have some big operations over in Africa and in particular Libya, they're getting a bit of a boost. So Tullow rising around 3%, and the broader index gaining around 0.4%, one of the better performing indexes in Europe today. There's a note from Otto. They say the broker Otto over in France, they say they don't expect to change their broad oil market predictions, but they do say to watch out for shares particularly focusing on Africa like Repsol and Eni and Saipem, as I mentioned. So it's definitely going to be one of the sectors that we're keeping a focus on today.
Now, we've been talking ever since the election, of course, about a Boris boost or a Boris boom, and I think people are watching for it in the housing area, but it does seem that prices are going up. There seems to be something going on in terms of people buying and selling rather more than they were, perhaps suggesting more confidence. So what are you seeing in terms of stocks?
That's right. So Rightmove's today saying that home prices jumping around 2%. That is having a feeder through to shares today, particularly the London-focused companies like Berkeley and Pearson, and those stocks are at the top of the leaderboard, almost gaining around 1% this morning. So not huge moves again, but definitely a boost. And there's also separate data showing that the luxury sector is doing really well since the election as well. So that would boost companies focused on the high-end market like Savills and Countrywide as well, perhaps, and also the estate agents performance there, so another sector in focus today. Separately, note that Into Properties today announcing a capital raise. Reports of the weekend said that they could raise around £1 billion in fresh equity. That's going to be a very negative one. I saw the stock down around 9% at the moment for Into Properties. More focused on the mall market, but still UK properties. So another one to watch there for Into, down 9%, as I mentioned.
Now, we talked about the post-election bounce. Well, perhaps it wasn't for the gin and tonic drinking classes, I don't know, because Fever Tree sales rather lost their fizz over the Christmas period.
That's right, so it's potentially another peak to add to your list. So peak gin could be coming in, according to Fever Tree's update. They're saying subdued trading over Christmas. So even before dry January, people cutting down on their gin, apparently. That stock's cooled down as much as 15% for Fever Tree. They're saying that it was one of their most subdued quarters that they've had in recent years. It is, of course, one of the UK's outstanding stocks. It doesn't trade on the main market, it trades on AIM, the junior market, but it has been a real success story. But it's going to give up around 10 to 15% of its gains for Fever Tree this morning.
There we are. Joe Easton, thanks very much. Bloomberg's Joe Easton with stocks to watch. I'm going to call it the Naira Che-Hitch effect, healthy January, and gin stocks just dropped through the floor. What can I say?
Do you know what? There's nothing to do with January or being healthy. I just don't like gin. I never have. Yeah, I find it sickening.
Well, many years ago, when I was young, I was mixed a kind of Mickey Finn involving an awful lot of gin by some alleged friends of mine, and I've never really been able to drink it since.
Oh, well, there we go. We found the answer. Let's get back to our top stories. Let's start with disruptions to the oil market that I mentioned in the data check. In Libya, the oil industry has been caught in the crossfire of the country's civil war. Forces of military commander Khalifa Haftar have shut down an oil pipeline and blocked exports. The national oil company says output will tumble to the lowest level since 2011.
And on Sunday, peace talks got underway in Germany to work towards a durable ceasefire for Libya. The 11 leaders who attended included Russia's Vladimir Putin and the Turkish President Erdogan. They agreed to halt weapons imports into Libya and to work towards a political solution. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel spoke to reporters on Sunday.
Well, agreement has been reached today that in future there will be no support extended to the conflict parties, and we also want to monitor the arms embargo and work within the UN towards that objective.
Boris Johnson says British officials could be sent to Libya to monitor the truce.
In Iraq, work has temporarily halted at an oil field. That's as widespread unrest escalates in one of OPEC's biggest producers. A second oil field is also at risk of closure. Local media reports that protesters shut down border crossings with Iran. Around 600 people have died and thousands wounded in the clashes. They're protesting government corruption and poor public services.
Meanwhile, in China, the 5-year loan prime rate was set at 4.8%. The 1-year prime rate also remained unchanged at 4.15% in December. The loan prime rate is a revamped market indicator of the price that lenders charge clients for new loans, released on or around the 20th day of every month.
Bloomberg Economics' take on this, by the way, is that the steady 1-year loan prime rate probably reflects the recent pickup in economic data and reinforces their view that the pace of easing this year will be more moderate than in 2019. A go slower stance on easing is what Bloomberg Economics calls it. Now, bankers and billionaires are descending on Davos for the World Economic Forum, where many will sip champagne and talk shop while tackling inequality and the future of globalization. Strategists are warning clients to brace for what Eurasia Group founder Ian Bremmer is calling a groundbreaking peak decade: peak globalization, peak capitalism, peak inequality, also peak central banks and peak climate change that will disrupt business and investing.
But one notable exception to the roster of the global elite gathering there is the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He's staying away to remind voters of his new focus as, quote, the people's government. And to reinforce that, the government confirmed it's looking to move the House of Lords out of London. The top candidates, York or Birmingham.
The battle lines are becoming clearer as the EU and UK prepare to start talks to reach a trade agreement. The Chancellor Sajid Javid and the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen have both now shown the huge distance that has to be crossed in the next 11 months, as Bloomberg's George Shanker reports.
Sajid Javid's stark reminder of the government's view of the future relationship with Brussels, with clear winners and losers in Britain's commercial sector, will have concentrated minds in the UK boardrooms. It was a clear rejoinder to Ursula von der Leyen's speech earlier this month that access to the single market depends on how far Johnson agrees to abide by the bloc's rules. Javid said there will not be alignment and Britain will not be a rule taker. Everyone understands these are opening positions, but the gap between London and Brussels is fast turning running into a chasm. In London, George Shankar, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now, for the latest in global news, here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Leanne, good morning.
Roger, good morning. Let's start in China, where at least 3 people have died and 200 diagnosed with the new SARS-like virus. The surge in cases is due in part to increased screening and testing. An independent report says as many as 1,700 people in Wuhan may have been infected with the coronavirus. China says the outbreak is still, quote, preventable and controllable. Sticking with China, where the country is moving to cut the production and use of plastic bags, that's over the next 5 years. More on that from Bloomberg's Rishad Salamat.
The National Development and Reform Commission says non-degradable plastic bags will be banned in supermarkets and shopping malls in major cities in China, and that will take effect by the end of the year. And the country's ubiquitous food delivery services in Beijing and Shanghai will be banned from using non-degradable packaging by 2022. And then the ban gets extended to the entire country in 2025. In Hong Kong, I'm Rishad Salamat, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
In Australia, more than 300 threatened species of plants and animals have been affected by the wildfires that have decimated an area almost the size of England. Bloomberg's Sibylla Gross has the details.
Fires destroyed at least 80% of known habitat for 49 of those species. The plight of Australia's unique wildlife has recently captured the world's attention after distressing images of charred koalas and kangaroos circulate online. Experts have estimated that as many as 1 billion animals may have been killed in the devastating fires that have taken at least 28 lives and destroyed over 3,000 homes. In Sydney, Sibylla Gross, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And finally, SpaceX has passed a crucial safety test. It clears the last major hurdle before a historic crewed mission for NASA, possibly in the first half of this year. The test showed SpaceX can safely abort a mission if something goes wrong after takeoff. Musk says the hardware for a manned launch will be in place by the end of February. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, oil climbs as political unrest in 2 key producers disrupt supply, reigniting concerns over the market's vulnerability to geopolitical risk. But is it time yet to fade the move? We get the latest from Dubai. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Today, nearly all business is international business. The same goes for business disputes. That's why the International Center for Dispute Resolution provides a faster, more efficient approach to dispute resolution across borders. Backed by the American Arbitration Association, the ICDR is the world's leading provider of dispute resolution services. Find out why global expertise matters. Visit ICDR.org.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the Lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Sherry Ann.
The Phase 1 trade deal is in the books, and it includes plenty of purchasing commitments from China. Some of the biggest come in the energy sector. From crude oil and refined products to liquefied natural gas and coal, China's agreeing to buy more than $50 billion of energy over the next 2 years. We can discuss all this with Sandhill Strategies co-founder Katie Bays. Katie, great to have you with us. Of course, we know that when it comes to the commodities market, some assets are tied to long-term contracts instead of spot purchases. So when you take everything into consideration, which market could be the biggest gainer here?
The market right now, so we work with a lot of institutional investors and companies, and many investors are focused on the crude oil market as being the most obvious beneficiary, but we actually think that the LNG market, the U.S. LNG exporter group, could be the big winner because that group is heavily dependent upon China for those future long-term contracts. The U.S. is a very cost-competitive supplier of LNG in the global market, with the exception of the tariff that China has on U.S. LNG at the moment, but we see the Phase 1 deal as potentially a sign that U.S. LNG exporters might be able to kind of break down that barrier with Chinese buyers and enter into the long-term contracts.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff. Time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now over to the Fast Word breaking news desk in Berlin for today's morning call. Here's Richard Jones.
Good morning, Sandra. It's been a mixed session for Asian equities, with the Nikkei 225 closing higher by 0.2%, the Kospi up 0.5%, the Hang Seng down 0.9, and the Shanghai Composite up 0.7. The E-mini S&P and E-mini Nasdaq futures are both tracking sideways, with the U.S. celebrating Martin Luther King Day. It's been a quiet open for European equities, with the Eurostoxx 50, the DAX, and CAC 40 all lower by 1 to 0.2%, with the FTSE 100 trading steady. Turning to the bond markets, the U.S. cash treasuries are not trading today with the U.S. public holiday. U.S. 10-year note futures are trading higher by 3/30 seconds, or about 1 basis point lower in yield, while the 10-year German Bund yield is steady at minus 0.22%. In the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Index is little changed, with the pound lagging all other G10 currencies following reports in the weekend UK press of no-deal planning for the time after the Brexit transition period. Looking at the European event risk calendar, it's a fairly quiet day. We've had Norway industrial confidence come in weaker than expected, with German PPI broadly in line with consensus. Looking ahead, Switzerland sight deposits are also released this morning. As for the central bank calendar, Christine Lagarde participates in an event in Brussels this evening after the close, although no remarks are set to be published from the ECB president. That's it from me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQUA Go on the Bloomberg Terminal. Sandra?
Thanks, Richard. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. The two sides in President Trump's impeachment trial have previewed their arguments. House Democrats and the president's legal team filed their first formal briefs over the weekend. Democrats say the president's pattern of misconduct made him a threat to the nation and the rule of law. The president's lawyers called the impeachment an attempt to overturn the 2016 election. The trial begins tomorrow. In Hong Kong, another sign that there's no end to the sight of unrest. A downtown rally has turned violent, and the government has pushed back on one of the protesters' key demands. It said Hong Kong residents should understand that any chief executive elected by all citizens shall also be accountable to Beijing. And finally, Venus Williams is out of the Australian Open after losing to 15-year-old Coco Gauff. Gauff has won in straight sets 7-6, 6-3 to secure a place in the second round. Williams was also beaten by Gauff at Wimbledon last summer. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garens. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Thanks very much indeed, Leanne. Now, Libya's oil industry has been caught in the crossfire of the country's civil war. Supporters of the Eastern military strongman Khalifa Haftar blocked exports at ports under his control. It's forced the state-run National Oil Corporation to declare force majeure and limit the country's oil production to 72,000 barrels per day. That's down from 1.2 million. At the same time, unrest in Iraq threatens two major oil fields there. Well, for more, let's go live now to Dubai, where Bloomberg's Gulf reporter Zainab Fatah stands by to speak to us. Zainab, good morning to you. Now, these peace talks to end the civil war, they happened in Berlin over the weekend. What do we know about the outcome, and has it changed the General Haftar's mind on blocking oil?
Well, the outcome is certainly not what international actors who participated hoped for. Commander Haftar balked at the possibility of signing a truce, and the best that they were able to come up with was to agree to name, put forward 5 names each side to form a committee and to allow those committees to hammer out the details going forward on what next step should be. The problem right now that we're dealing with is the situation where a lot of the observers and all the reporting indicates that Mr. Haftar is not interested and does not seem to be buying into the process that's put forward in Berlin and elsewhere, although he is participating. We know that this conference was put there basically to force all the countries that were supporting Haftar and the internationally recognized government in Tripoli to stop their support for the parties that are participating in the civil war there, and to return back to an arms embargo that was initiated and instituted by the UN.
Zainab, there was a two-pronged reason for the move in oil that we saw overnight, and that was also because of concerns around Iraq. So give us an update on that and how that's likely to move ahead in terms of supply disruptions.
Absolutely. Iraq, we are seeing the demonstrations and nationwide protests that were going on since October 1st resuming. Because during the past few weeks after the killing of General Soleimani, we saw that demonstrators stopped coming to the streets, and they kind of stopped for a while to allow for the mourning period and so on. But now people are coming back and basically saying we need to resolve all the standing issues that we have been calling for the past few months. They want to oust all the government that's mostly they see as beholden to Iran, and Iran has a lot of influence within the current government, and they want a government of technocrats that can basically deal with the unemployment issue, with the issues of inadequate services and insecurity and so on. So basically going back to this, we saw that some of the infrastructure for oil and some of the fields had to be shut down to protect against the rising tensions in the country.
And I suppose, Zainab, all this brings us back to a familiar theme in a way, which is the insecurity of oil supply. We saw this, of course, with the attack on the Saudi oil installation a few months ago. But it must bring it back into investors' minds and into the minds of economies globally.
Absolutely. We're looking at Iraq and Libya, 2 countries that make up about 20% of the OPEC production right now. And both of them are dealing with various issues. But investors see Iraq's problems are much more deep-rooted and harder to tackle than Libya. The hope is that enough international pressure from the allies of Haftar, like Russia and the United Arab Emirates, may force him to reopen and stop the blockage of the oil going into the ports for shipments. While on the other hand, the problems in Iraq are much more deep-rooted. They have to do with the huge influence that Iran plays within the Iraqi government, and many don't see how Iran would allow Iraq to slip out of its grasp. At the same time, those problems seem to be on a course for only escalation in Iraq.
Great to have you with us. Thank you so much. Bloomberg's Gulf reporter Zainab Fatah live for us in Dubai. And Libya's oil production, by the way, at the lowest level since August 2011, according to Bloomberg data. Looking at the oil price, we're seeing WTI trading at 59.02, up 0.8%. Brent at 65.48, up almost 1%. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Jamie Bolton, a member of the dynasty that has run Santander for more than a century, was sentenced to 18 months in prison and fined $58 million for smuggling Pablo Picasso's Head of a Young Woman painting out of Spain. Spain has some of the strictest heritage laws in Europe, and Bolton has about a week to appeal the sentence. In other art news, fugitive Hong Kong billionaire Joseph Lau is selling David Hockney's The Splash at the year's first major auction. The 1966 canvas has a low estimate of $26.1 million. Known for his investment in art, wine, and jewelry, Lau bought 5 diamonds for $128 million from 2009 through 2015. Speaking of gems, the second biggest diamond in history will be cut, polished, and turned into a collection of Louis Vuitton jewelry. Lucara Diamond found the 1,758-carat Sewello diamond at its Botswana mine last year. It's unclear how valuable the polished diamonds will be. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Hello, I'm here to tell you that age really does bring wisdom, and you may still have plenty to contribute. At Eisner Amper, we're successful at helping business owners and entrepreneurs assess and plan for the future, as well as maximize where you are in the present. If you're curious about how to plan for both your professional and personal future, come and talk to us. I'm Lisa Stewart, Principal in charge of the Center for Family Business Excellence, and I'd love to help you to find the right path forward. You can find us at eisneramper.com/family.
Business is constant.
Take the helm and ignite your spirit of adventure with a Sunsail holiday. Relax on a skippered yacht from sunny St. Lucia to the nutmeg-scented shores of Grenada. Or take charge with a bareboat charter along Dubrovnik's glittering coastline. With up to 20% off selected destinations, now is the time to book your Sunsail adventure. Sunsail. See the world differently.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see three men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night. And somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here. Testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use. And the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Heroes. They're the ones we turn to in our darkest hour. Like when you blow a fuse and the lights go off. Whether it's electrics to heating, plumbing to plastering. At Local Heroes, every job completed by an expert tradesperson comes with a 12-month British Gas guarantee when you pay online. So, if it needs fixing, there's a local hero for that. To get a quote, search Local Heroes. Terms and conditions apply.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Neera Chehich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
We're 30 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe, and we're seeing a little bit of a down day. The Stock 600 trending lower by 0.2% after 4 days of gains that took Europe's equity benchmark to a record on Friday. Across regional benchmarks, the FTSE 100 did start in the green. We're now edging down 0.1% into the red. The CAC 40 down 0.25 percentage point. The DAX off by 0.1%, and the IBEX and FTSE MIB leading losses down about 0.4%. In the US, stock and bond cash trading will not be happening today because because of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. But of course, US benchmarks hit records on Friday as well. Futures a little soft. Dow, S&P and NASDAQ futures after treading water for a lot of the Asian session and the start of the European session are now lower by about 0.1%. The 10-year Treasury yield closed on Friday on a 182 handle. And in Europe, not a lot of movement in bond markets. The 10-year Bund yield steady at -21. The 10-year gilt yield is now steady after slipping a little bit earlier. Slipping along with the pound, which is still the worst G10 performer today. We're down 0.4% if we look at cable trading below 130 at 129.81. And this as bets have been picking up for a rate cut from the Bank of England this month. The market pricing around a 70% probability of that right now as we look ahead to labour market data tomorrow and some crucial PMI data later in the week, manufacturing services and composite. The market looking for a composite number above 50. Taking a look at the oil markets, that of course has stolen the focus today as well, with concerns about supply disruptions both in Libya and Iraq, pushing WTI up 0.9% to $59.06 a barrel. Brent at 65.53, up 1%. Roger.
Right, let's have a look at some of today's top stories. Now, in Libya, the oil industry has been caught in the crossfire of the country's civil war. Forces of the military strongman Khalifa Haftar have shut down an oil pipeline and blocked exports. The national oil company says output will tumble to the lowest level since 2011.
In Iraq, work has temporarily halted at an oil field. That's as widespread unrest escalates in one of OPEC's biggest producers. A second oil field is also at risk of closure. Local media reports protesters shut down border crossings with Iran. Around 600 people have died and thousands were wounded in the clashes. They're protesting government corruption and poor public services.
And in top corporate news, Airbus is offering airlines a new way to guard against falling fares. It's developing a derivatives-based trading platform to protect against declining ticket prices. The aim is to help sustain growth in jet orders. Clients will be able to trade futures and options on indexes that capture fluctuations across the industry.
And in hedge fund news, billionaire money managers Chris Hone and Stephen Mandel led hedge fund gains last year. That's as surging markets helped the $3 trillion market post its best performance in a decade. According to estimates by LCH Investments, a fund of hedge funds, the industry racked up gains worth $178 billion after fees.
Well, let's get more on that story because we're joined now by Bloomberg's Danny Berger here in the studio. So, Danny, hedge funds made $178 billion for the clients in 2019, as we heard, but I would have still got a better return in an index fund, wouldn't I?
Yeah, and it's hard to really justify the high fees. Of course, the hedge fund typical fee is 2 and 20 structure. And you can buy S&P 500 index funds for a couple basis points. Even some funds out there that'll essentially pay you to own them based on how their structure is. But this is something we continuously see, and it's just the math here would dictate that the index funds do better. They're market cap weighted, so when you have these big tech heavyweights, they continue to do better. They continue to get a higher weighting. So that momentum play is really in favor of the index fund. So if you're a hedge fund, unless you're even more concentrated in those top stocks, you're not going to outperform. And one would argue the point of a hedge fund is not to be correlated with the broader benchmark. So you're going to continue to see this underperformance, really, if this is just how the market dynamic continues with the top companies continuing to do better.
So if you were one of the best performing hedge funds of 2019, Danny, what was the winning strategy?
So maybe this isn't really much of a surprise at all, given the index, what the indexes did, but you just basically had to be long equities to do well. So one of the best ones, TCI, it gained 41%. That's its best year since 2013. Long only activist kind of strategy. It had some big concentrations, Charter Communications, a big position in Moody's. But again, on the long only theme, Egerton Capital, it's here in London. It's new to the top 20 list. They have a long only strategy that gained 34%. And then when you look at their long short position, it rose only 22%. 22, of course, still better than the average fund. But even so, it just shows you how if you have any sort of short position, you're not going to do as well if you're going completely long.
Now, I mean, in this sort of landscape, I mean, certain names stand out. And Ray Dalio, I mean, you just don't think of seeing him in any negative area, and he had one of the highest net gains since its inception. But this year, it wasn't good.
Yeah, it's a pure alpha strategy. So it's known for two strategies. One is all weather, that gained this year, but pure alpha, which is a lot of macro bets, and it tries not to be really concentrated or correlated to anything, fell slightly this year. It's the first time since 2000 that it has. But the crazy thing about it is usually when you have funds that are losing money, that are profits are negative, you tend to see a mass exodus. But Dalio just has so much mystique around what he does. Bridgewater with the radical transparency. He has his books out, that there's still a very, very big waiting list to get into the fund. Last Bloomberg reported it's about $5 billion waiting to get in to Ray Dalio's Pure Alpha fund. So it lost money this year, but for now, investors sticking with it.
Great to have you with us. Danny Berger, Bloomberg's market reporter, talking to us about the hedge funds in 2019 that did the best and why. Something we'll no doubt be talking about a lot more in 2020 as well. For the latest in global news, here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans.
Good morning, Naira. An outbreak of pneumonia in central China has now got even bigger. More than 200 people have been diagnosed with the coronavirus. At least 3 people have died. Health experts say there's evidence that the illness is spreading from people to people. Huawei's chief financial officer Meng Wanzhou will begin extradition hearings in Vancouver today. It comes 13 months after she was arrested on U.S. charges of bank and wire fraud in violation of Washington's sanctions on Iran. Speaking to Bloomberg last year, Huawei CEO Ren Zhengfei hit out at the U.S. move.
The US manages its own companies. The US is not the international police. They can't manage the whole world. The rest of the world decides whether they should work with us based on their own business interests and positions.
Let's cross over to Japan, where Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is expected to open a new sitting in Parliament today with a fresh call to revise the country's US-imposed pacifist constitution. Bloomberg's Isabel Reynolds reports.
Abe has repeatedly said he wants to be the one to bring about the first changes to the document. His plan is to add wording to the pacifist Article 9 to make explicit the constitutionality of what Japan calls its self-defense forces. With opponents inside his own ruling coalition and only 20 months left of his term as party leader, his prospects are doubtful. In Tokyo, Isabel Reynolds, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And finally, SpaceX has blown up one of its very own rockets. It was all part of a test to see how a capsule that will eventually carry astronauts reacts in an emergency. It was a success after breaking away and parachuting safely into the Atlantic Ocean. Jim Bernstein from NASA says this was one of the final steps before they can start taking passengers to the International Space Station.
It looked beautiful. We all loved watching it, but now the work begins. This, of course, represents us returning American astronauts to space on American rockets from American soil.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Roger.
Leanne, thanks. Now with the morning sport, here's George Alderman.
Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp still doing his best to play down talk. His side have all but secured the Premier League title. Their 2-0 win over Manchester United at Anfield took them 16 points clear at the top of the table, and they have a game in hand. The home fans saying we're going to win the league at full time, but Klopp's not getting carried away.
Of course they're allowed to dream, to sing whatever they want, as long as they do their job as well in a moment when we play. All fine, we will not be part of that party yet, but it's no problem. We know our job.
In yesterday's early match, third place Leicester lost 2-1 at Burnley. Holders Celtic face the prospect of an upset in the 5th round of the Scottish Cup. They'll make the trip to League One side Clyde, while their Glasgow rivals Rangers will play away at fellow top-flight team Hamilton next month. Dundee United, or Hibs, who drew 2-2 yesterday, have been drawn against BSC Glasgow in the last 16. England's cricketers will hope to wrap up a big win over South Africa on the final day of the third test. They resume in Port Elizabeth this morning, leading by 188 runs, and with the hosts struggling on 102 for 6 in their second innings. But there's a possibility Joe Root's side could be frustrated by rain. Victory would put them 2-1 up in the 4-match series. And Saracens are still in with a chance of retaining their title in Rugby Union's European Champions Cup. They sealed the place in the quarter-finals with a 27-24 win over Racing 92, a day after their relegation from the Premiership for breaching the salary cap was confirmed. Gloucester's hopes are over following a 35-14 defeat at Toulouse.
That's your European sport. Coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Michael Hewson, Chief Market Analyst at CMC Markets, joins us. Lots to discuss as we kick off a big week in Davos, with the peak decade being one of the themes in focus. And, of course, US and European markets hitting records on Friday. Europe a little soft today. US markets closed.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Joan London with The Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Fox.
When it comes to music, I've heard it all. Pink Floyd, Sean Paul, Slipknot. But in the Witch Test Lab, hearing isn't enough. When we test headphones, we really listen. Not just to the music, but to the stuff that gets in the way. The traffic, the chatter, all that. Mind the gap. We simulate the loudest commute to find you the headphones that cancel out the noise. So you know we're only recommending the best.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
Hello, I'm your captain for today's Virgin Atlantic flight. Please drop everything and pay close attention to the following announcement. The sail is now on. Our crew are ready to take your bags and stresses away. The cocktails are ready to serve, the movies are loaded, and we're all set for takeoff to the Caribbean. So, take your seat in our award-winning economy class. We're ready to go when you are.
The Virgin Atlantic sail. Fly amazing for less. For more details, visit virginatlantic.com.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Hello,
I'm Nat Coombs from ESPN's The Nat Coombs Show, which admittedly is 1 out of 10 for original podcast name, but 10 out of 10 for NFL chat. Every week, we're dropping 4 episodes with an all-pro lineup of terrific guests, journalists, comedians, players, coaches, you name it, all getting you up to speed with everything gridiron. The Nat Coombs Show, American football, British accent. Add to your favourites and listen on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
And on Quick Take by Bloomberg, this is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, it's all about oil this morning. We're seeing crude rallying on supply disruptions in Libya and Iraq. WTI currently up 0.8%, just below $59 a barrel. Brent well above $65 a barrel after Libyan rebel forces blocked oil exports and unrest in Iraq threatens 2 oil fields. Gold is also a bid this morning, up 0.2% at $1,560 a troy ounce. In equities, we are seeing European stocks turning lower. The Stock 600 down 0.2%. The FTSE and the DAX lower by 0.1%. The CAC 40 slipping 0.3% in Paris. US futures also slightly weaker despite a moderately positive trading day in Asia earlier. In stocks, I am keeping a close eye on BAE Systems. It's trading higher after buying Collins Aerospace for $1.9 billion. Also, keep an eye on UK house builders after Rightmove said that house prices had rallied the most in January ever, according to all their surveys. Now, that's the moves we've been seeing in oil has been boosting commodity currencies earlier. However, that rally in, for instance, the Norwegian krona is really pairing gains now, and we're actually really seeing G10 currencies in a very tight range. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index flat, dollar yen currently holding at 110.2. The one to watch is really sterling, down 0.3% at 1.297. Traders selling off the pound after a bad retail sales number on Friday really increased expectations for a BOE rate cut next week. All eyes now on the jobs data due out tomorrow. Bear in mind, liquidity is generally low today. The US is closed for Martin Luther King Day, so there's no cash treasury trade, but we are seeing bunds holding at negative 21. 10-year gilt yields slightly lower, down a basis point at 63 basis points. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Violence has erupted again in Beirut, with police and protesters clashing outside Parliament. More than 100 people were injured, according to Lebanese authorities and the Red Cross, with 47 needing hospital treatment. The violence comes amid a rapidly worsening financial crisis and an impasse over the formation of a new government. Demonstrators say the political elite is ignoring them. The protests in Hong Kong are keeping people away from the city. The airport's passenger number fell in 2019 for the first time in a decade. Passenger traffic fell more than 4% in 2018. At one point in August, demonstrators paralyzed the airport. They staged a sit-in and kept people from traveling. And finally, the world's richest 1% have more than twice the wealth of the rest of humanity combined. That's according to Oxfam. Just put it another way, just over 2,100 people have more money than 4.5 billion. The UK-based charity says governments are massively undertaxing rich individuals and corporations and underfunding public services. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Thank you so much, Leanne. And this takes us back to the top of the show, Roger, where we were talking about one of the big topics that's going to be no doubt addressed at Davos. I mean, for several years in a row, the issue of inequality has been addressed, but it's going to crop up again, and perhaps with even more vigour this time.
It's very stark at the moment when you just consider the billionaires who are jetting in, the amazing situation they find themselves, I think, while they're talking about inequality at Davos, just rather crystallises the whole problem.
Exactly. And joining us down the line to discuss what to look ahead to this week and more all across the markets is Michael Hewson, Chief Market Analyst at CMC Markets. Michael, great to have you with us. Before we get on to the daily market moves, weekly moves as well, why not just kick off on what you're looking ahead to at Davos and what cues you might take from some of the policymakers that we're going to hear from this week?
Davos, you obviously read my morning notes, Neera, because I have to say Davos is one of those events that it completely tends to drop off my radar, because ultimately it's a talking shop. You know, you and Roger were talking earlier about growing inequality. Well, I think one of the main reasons of growing inequality is central banks. And you know, with that in mind, obviously we have a whole host of central bank rate meetings over the course of the next 2 weeks, starting with the Bank of Japan overnight, then we've got Bank of Canada, ECB, Federal Reserve next week, and the Bank of England next week. And for me, really, I think, you know, if business leaders and politicians want to get to grips with inequality, then they have to stop relying on central banks to do their dirty work for them. You know, we heard this from Mario Draghi consistently over the past 8 years. The necessity of structural reform within the euro area. I mean, it's not just Europe. It's here in the UK. Politicians have used central banks as a buffer, if you like, to avoid making difficult decisions. And until such times as politicians step up to the plate and actually play their part, they're not really going to address inequality. So that, you know, people in Davos can talk until they're blue in the face. At the moment, and it has been for the past 10 years, it's much ado about nothing.
So, Michael, well, the result of all this, the looser monetary policy, the way that the markets are going, and we've seen record highs on Friday. Stocks, clearly, if you have money, if you're part of the privileged elite, they're the place to be, aren't they?
Well, absolutely. But unfortunately, not everyone has stocks. And yes, you can argue that everyone has pensions, and there is almost a, you know, sort of a trickle-up effect, if you like, in terms of asset prices. But there isn't really a trickle-down effect when it comes to looking at the overall strength of the lower end, I think, in terms of wages of the global economy. Only now are we starting to see real earnings growth in some of the mainstream economies. Here in the UK, we've started to see real wages outstripping inflation. In the US, we've got nominal real earnings growth, nothing much to really speak of, and not really seeing any evidence of it in Europe. So, yes, you can certainly argue that it's boosting asset prices, but it's certainly not boosting wages.
And as you've mentioned, the UK, Michael, I mean, one of the notable absentees at Davos is, of course, Boris Johnson. Those talks starting with the EU on the trade deal. But also, I want to bring the conversation to the market pricing for a BOE rate cut for January, which is at around 70%. We look ahead to labour market data tomorrow, a crucial composite PMI number towards the end of the week. Bloomberg Economics says we'll get a reading of 51.5. Anything below 51.5 would open the door for a cut. How trained are your eyes on that number, and are you expecting a cut regardless of the number that we get from that PMI data this week?
Well, I think if we're looking at the Bank of England's reaction function, they always have a tendency to err on the side of cutting rates. We saw that in 2016 in the wake of the Brexit referendum, when they unnecessarily, aggressively eased monetary policy. I argued at the time it was unnecessary. All it succeeds in doing is introducing an inflationary shock into the UK economy, and that's precisely what it did do. So I think there is an expectation they will cut. I don't think that they should. I don't think it is necessary with interest rates at their currently low levels. I don't think it will really introduce any significant boost to the UK economy. And let's not forget, Neera, we've got a potential UK budget coming on the 11th of March. I think the Bank of England can wait. And I would probably argue that the if I was looking at that Bank of England meeting at the end of this month, I wouldn't actually be looking for them to cut rates. I know the market is pricing that in, but if I was going to take a position, I'd be nominally long of sterling heading into that meeting, because I think there's a potential for the Bank of England maybe to actually defer until after March, and we've got more data, because ultimately when you look at the end of last year, an awful lot of political uncertainty was reining in, or basically curbing people's enthusiasm to really invest. And I think if we get a decent number this week from the PMIs, that might stay the Bank of England's hand.
And Michael, in these headwinds, where does the pound go? I mean, it's now just a fraction below 1.3 in cable. Where do you see it going in the event of, well, what you're thinking, or indeed what the market's thinking?
Well, I think the market is already starting to price in the prospects of a rate cut. It's only 25 basis points is probably going to be the extent of it. And that, for me, I think the floor in the pound against the dollar is around about just below where we are now, around about 128. If it drops much below that, then obviously I'd have to throw in a towel on my long sterling position. But I'm very much a case of buy the sterling dip leading into the Bank of England rate meeting. And let's not also forget, it's not just a zero-sum game when it comes to the Bank of England. We've also got a Fed rate meeting as well next week.
Yeah, and on that point, I'm debating whether to ask you more on US equities or oil, but let's do oil. We're higher today, WTI and Brent, not much higher, but definitely showing a little bit concern around supply risk in Libya and Iraq. Would you say it's time to fade that move higher, Michael?
I would, yeah. We've seen over the course of the last 6 to 12 months, any move higher in oil prices generally tends to be faded. We saw it earlier this month. We saw it when we had the drone strike on the Saudi Aramco facilities, short of a full-scale shooting war in the Middle East. It's very much a case, I think, of sell the rally on oil. Ultimately, Neera, I think oil is in a range. The lower end of the range is around about $60 a barrel. The upper end of the range is sort of the high 60s.
All right, Michael, thank you very much. Michael Hewson there, Chief Market Analyst at CMC Markets. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. And coming up, Anna Edwards and Matt Miller will take over the next hour of Daybreak Europe. They'll speak to Pooja Kumra, our Toronto Dominion Bank European rate strategist.
European equities still on the back foot almost an hour into the equity market open, down 0.25 percentage point on the Stock 600 after it hit a record on Friday, along with US benchmarks. US markets closed today. This is Bloomberg.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Got big plans for 2020? Capture and share every highlight on a gorgeous iPhone 11 with an ultra-wide camera. In Tesco Mobile's big January sale, you can get the latest iPhone for £40.75 a month with double data. That's a mighty 20 gigs. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 26th of January. Was 10 gigs, now 20 gigs. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements with Tesco Mobile required. Subject to status. Fair use policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in. Touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
What we're now seeing for the first time is this facade of absolute unity beginning to break down in the EU.
We expect that there will be some type of slowdown recession beyond 2019.
The European banking system, although recovering, hasn't recovered, and there are areas of fragility.
We've seen this before, trade talks that lead nowhere, and then tariffs. We just swing from one to the other, and markets get caught in the middle.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe with Anna Edwards and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
I've missed you, Anna. Good morning from Berlin. I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio. Normally, when we kick off this show, Anna and I have just spent 2 hours together on Bloomberg TV, but not,
yes, indeed.
Not today.
No, today, Martin Luther King Day in the US. US markets are closed, which means my services are required later in the day, which is why we find ourselves uniting for the first time on radio at 9 o'clock London time. Well, it's very nice to be here, Matt, and I'm kind of pleased you missed me, but I hope you had fun nonetheless on European Market Open.
Yes, one of the things that happened without you was that European markets, even with futures pointing higher and a positive open, just started to turn around and drop. And now we're seeing across the board red arrows here in the EU.
Yeah,
well,
indeed.
And the UK, which is still in the EU.
Which is still, just for now. Yes, we've got European markets then on the back foot, down by 0.3% on the Stock 600. The FTSE 100 kind of running in line with that, down by 0.25%. The CAC down by 0.3%, and the DAX down 0.2%. US futures, for what it's worth, because there won't be any trading today, but interesting to get their perspective anyway. US futures point to a weaker open on Wall Street, but that, of course, will come tomorrow on Tuesday instead of Monday. But looking at the sector picture, Matt, interesting to see on European markets, we have no sectors in positive territory. Insurance is almost there, but not quite. Utilities down 0.7%. Media stocks a weak spot. And also the banking sector in Germany, I notice, running a little bit weaker than some of the others. US futures, as I mentioned, down, but it is a US holiday. A lot of movement in oil prices earlier on. 65.35 is where we trade on the Brent price, up by 0.8%. Action in Libya by armed forces to shut a pipeline there. Security staff blocking infrastructure in Iraq. Both of those flare-ups in tensions adding to upside pressure on oil prices, but will it last? So it seems we've got through the trade deal that came the last couple of weeks or so, the phase one trade deal at least, and now the focus moves on to, yes, central banks, BOJ, ECB meeting this week, but also profit reports from corporates, Netflix, UBS, a couple of the names in the fray, and of course plenty of coverage coming from Davos this week as well, Matt.
Yeah, a lot going on this week at Davos. We're going to hear from some huge names there. David Solomon from Goldman Sachs. We'll get an interview with him. We're also going to talk to Carrie Lam, the embattled chief executive of Hong Kong. So a lot to pay attention to. Really looking forward to that. Now, sterling is weaker today ahead of UK jobs data due out tomorrow. Traders are selling off the pound after a bad retail sales number on Friday. Increased expectations for a rate cut next week. Our own MLive contributor Richard Jones has been pointing that out. He's been forecasting that for a while now. For more, we're joined by Pooja Kumra. She is European rate strategist at TD Bank, Toronto Dominion Bank, and joins us to talk about a lot of things, but we'll kick it off with this. Pooja, what are you expecting from the BOE?
Good morning. Yes, so far the data has been extremely bad. We had lots of retail sales data and CPI last week. And as you said, this week's focus will be definitely on the jobs data and more importantly on the PMIs, because they will provide us the sentiment for January, i.e. the post-election market sentiment. So that is really key for markets. But I think given the dovish pivot that we have seen from most of the BOE members, as well as the data, it's more likely that they do deliver on a cut. I mean, we are markets are already priced for over 75% chance of cut in Jan meeting. And do remember, this is Carney's last meeting, so it's his last chance to actually make markets happy before Andrew Bailey kicks in.
Yes, interesting to note, we saw some housing data that looked sort of positive today, didn't it? That bouncing a little bit after the uncertainty surrounding the election in December. So that sort of points in the other direction, I suppose. And we shouldn't forget we get a big fiscal boost due with a big increase in infrastructure spending expected around March. But you still expect to see 2 cuts from the BOE. Over what time scale then, Pooja?
So TD is calling for a cut in Jan as well as in May. As you said, definitely there is a lot of pressure being put on the fiscal side, but anything gets delivered in the March 11th budget, so which is still far away from here. And also given the fact that there's a lot of noise going around the ultimate trade deal that we actually get with EU, and the transition period is to end in December 2020. So we are still not out of the woods, even though we have signed the withdrawal bill. So uncertainty regarding the trade deal will definitely actually will not help the investment side of UK at this stage early. So we cannot really say everything has been resolved.
I wonder your take on the rest of Europe. We talked about this on TV, but a lot of our radio listeners weren't watching my program this morning. What do you think about the ECB, Christine Lagarde, negative rates? How does that look in 2020 to you?
All right, so again, this meeting should not come with much deliverables just because it's not a forecast meeting. But with respect to, there's a lot of talk about negative rates, and there's a lot of skepticism whether ECB does have their tools that to actually help the economy. So the way we have started since last November, the data has started to improve, and that is something that risks are now less pronounced. And I think this should come as a relief to ECB. And so what we would see the focus now turning into is their strategic review, where they basically see what is the impact of different tools to the economy. I don't see the need, I don't think that it's the time when they will start pulling off all the easing measures just because it's too early to declare victory. We would be looking for the March updated forecast for growth and inflation, but it is something where they are looking towards to resolve the issue. ECB did introduce a deposit tiering system just because they realized that rates could be low for longer, and that's how they want to help banks.
Yes, in terms of those rates low for longer, Matt sent me a report about the BNP Paribas CEO, Jean-Laurent Bonnafé, who sees negative interest rates as a lasting phenomenon. That seems to have got into the market psyche, which is interesting. But you're actually projecting that Bund yields will get back to zero, I think, by the end of the year, Pooja. So what is the prospect for this negative interest rate environment?
Yes, so prospects in terms of negative rate environment is that right now markets have actually realized that there is limited benefit of further cuts in ECB rate, and they're also easing with respect to their 20 billion package. Now, if the growth outlook continues to boost, and which is something that we have seen since the US-China trade deal has been resolved, even the Brexit uncertainty has reduced a bit, so it gives them a chance to actually be on hold. Now, I think if ECB is on hold, it basically means that there's no reason why we would see bond yields rallying like crazy. And nonetheless, as the inflation term premium starts creeping in bond yields, you will see that the entire curve starts actually coming to the positive territory. It will take long. As I said, the inflation is still sticky. We have reached 1.3% in core as well as ICP, but if we see that momentum continuing, that should definitely be visible in break-evens, and you could see 10-year yields actually entering the positive territory.
Pooja, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. Pooja Kumra is European rate strategist at TD Bank with us today on Bloomberg TV and radio.
Let's get the latest in global news. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans.
Good morning, Anna. The battle lines are becoming clearer as the EU and UK prepare to start talks to reach a trade agreement. The Chancellor, Sajid Javid, and the Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, have both now shown the huge distance that has to be crossed in the next 11 months, as Bloomberg's George Shankar reports.
Sajid Javid's stark reminder of the government's view of the future relationship with Brussels, with clear winners and losers in Britain's commercial sector, will have concentrated minds in the UK boardrooms. It was a clear rejoinder to Ursula von der Leyen's speech earlier this month that access to the single market depends on how far Johnson agrees to abide by the bloc's rules. Javid said there will not be alignment and Britain will not be a rule taker. Everyone understands these are opening positions, but the gap between London and Brussels is fast turning into a chasm. In London, George Shankar, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
An outbreak of pneumonia in central China has now got even bigger. More than 200 people have been diagnosed with the coronavirus. At least 3 people have died. Health experts say there's evidence that the illness is now spreading from people to people. In Australia, more than 300 threatened species of plants and animals have been affected by the wildfires that have decimated an area almost the size of England. Bloomberg's Sibylla Gross has all the details.
Fires destroyed at least 80% of known habitat for 49 of those species. The plight of Australia's unique wildlife has recently captured the world's attention after distressing images of charred koalas and kangaroos circulate online. Experts have estimated that as many as 1 billion animals may have been killed in the devastating fires that have taken at least 28 lives and destroyed over 3,000 homes. In Sydney, Sibylla Gross, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And finally, Elon Musk's rocket company has passed a crucial safety test. SpaceX has cleared its first major hurdle to a historic first crewed flight for NASA. The Falcon 9 rocket with the Crew Dragon spacecraft launched from the Kennedy Space Center. SpaceX then demonstrated Dragon's ability to eject from the rocket during an emergency. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garrett. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Thanks very much, Leanne. Now with your morning sports news, here's George Alderman.
Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp still doing his best to play down talk his side have all but secured the Premier League title. Their 2-0 win over Manchester United at Anfield took them 16 points clear at the top of the table, and they have a game in hand. The home fans saying we're going to win the league at full time, but Klopp's not getting carried away.
Of course they are allowed to dream, to sing whatever they want, as long as they do their job as well. In a moment when we play, all fine. We will not be part of that party yet, but it's no problem. We know our job.
In yesterday's early match, third place Leicester lost 2-1 at Burnley. Holders Celtic face the prospect of an upset in the 5th round of the Scottish Cup. They'll make the trip to League One side Clyde, while their Glasgow rivals Rangers will play away at fellow top-flight team Hamilton next month. Dundee United, or Hibs, who drew 2-2 yesterday, have been drawn against BSC Glasgow in the last 16. England's cricketers will hope to wrap up a big win over South Africa on the final day of the third test. They resume in Port Elizabeth this morning, leading by 188 runs, and with the hosts struggling on 102 for 6 in their second innings. But there's a possibility Joe Root's side could be frustrated by rain. Victory would put them 2-1 up in the 4-match series. And Saracens are still in with a chance of retaining their title in Rugby Union's European Champions Cup. They sealed a place in the quarter-finals with a 27-24 win over Racing 92, a day after their relegation from the Premiership for breaching the salary cap was confirmed. Gloucester's hopes are over following a 35-14 defeat at Toulouse.
All right, let's get the U.S. sports as well. For that, we go to Pete Fox.
Let the hype begin as the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs punch their ticket to Super Bowl 54. First, it was the Chiefs coming from behind at Arrowhead against the Titans. They trailed by double digits twice early in the game, but rallied with 28 unanswered. They go on to win it 35-24. Mahomes throwing for 3 touchdowns and running for 1 in the win. The NFC Championship game at Levi's saw the Niners cruise to victory over Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. 37-20, Rodgers threw for 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Jimmy Garoppolo, a 6 of 8 day for 77 yards. But Raheem Mostert did all the work. 29 carries, 220 yards, and 4 touchdowns in the win. San Francisco heading back to the Super Bowl for the first time since 2013. For the Chiefs, it's their first appearance there in 50 years. I'm Pete Fox, that's your Bloomberg NBC World Sports Update.
Thanks to Pete for that. Still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, how do we solve inequality and climate change challenges? Bloomberg opinion columnist Andreas Kluth suggests widespread liberalism is the answer. A closer look at his column next. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
In the world of financial advice, speed, clarity, and foresight aren't just nice to have, they're required to survive. Adipar provides advisors the real-time portfolio reporting and insights required to realize the goals and personal potential for their clients. Trusted by thousands of wealth advisors, from family offices, RIAs, and large financial institutions, Adipar helps you make better, more informed investment decisions. To learn more, visit us at addepar.com.
When you went car shopping, you meant business. You ace vehicle history searches and test drives. You out-salesman the salesman. Now you've got your wheels. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll have the info you need to get more for your future. Go to aceyourretirement.org, because when it comes to speeding past financial challenges, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Sherry Ann.
The Phase 1 trade deal is in the books, and it includes plenty of purchasing commitments from China. Some of the biggest come in the energy sector. From crude oil and refined products to liquefied natural gas and coal, China's agreeing to buy more than $50 billion of energy over the next 2 years. We can discuss all this with Sandhill Strategies co-founder Katie Bays. Katie, great to have you with us. Of course, we know that when it comes to the commodities market, some assets are tied to long-term contracts instead of spot purchases. So when you take everything into consideration, which market could be the biggest gainer here?
The market right now, so we work with a lot of institutional investors and companies, and many investors are focused on the crude oil market as being the most obvious beneficiary, but we actually think that the LNG market, the U.S. LNG exporter group, could be the big winner, because that group is heavily dependent upon China for those future long-term contracts. The U.S. is a very cost-competitive supplier of LNG in the global market, with the exception of the tariff that China has on U.S. LNG at the moment. But we see the Phase 1 deal as potentially a sign that U.S. LNG exporters might be able to kind of break down that barrier with Chinese buyers and enter into the long-term contracts.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So we have slightly markets looking for direction, given that it's Martin Luther King Day over in the US, which means that equity and bond markets there are closed. Also towards the end of this week, it will be the Lunar New Year, so that will be celebrated, of course, in Asia. China will be shut and offline on Friday. As for where we are, though, in Europe right now, we're down 0.25% on the US stock 600. The worst performer, Fry, down 4.8% right now. The FTSE 100 also drops 0.2% this morning, after we had a reasonably positive trading session over in Asia, and of course record highs for the European benchmark last Friday, as well as the US Nasdaq, S&P 500 and Dow Jones all closing records. But it looks as if we're looking for direction, perhaps consolidating given all the gains of 2019 and at the start of this year. The other big story that we have been watching and reporting closely, of course, the threats and the production impediments in Libya and Iraq. That meant that we saw WTI and Brent crude jump by around 2%, but those gains have really pulled back. So at the moment we're on WTI crude futures trading $58.79, so up 0.5%, the same as Brent crude futures, which trade at $65.18. In terms of the FX market, Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index actually gains 0.1%. The losses on the British pound increase. We're weaker 0.4% on cable, trading at 1 spot 2963, and the euro spot price also weaker at 1 spot 1085. There were comments from Sajid Javid, the UK Chancellor, saying that the UK economy will shift further away from the EU. So I think that has spooked markets somewhat this morning ahead of UK jobs data out on Tuesday. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Goins with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. The two sides in President Trump's impeachment trial have previewed their arguments. House Democrats and the president's legal team filed their first formal briefs over the weekend. Democrats say the president's pattern of misconduct made him a threat to the nation and the rule of law. The president's lawyers called the impeachment an attempt to overturn the 2016 election. The trial begins tomorrow. In Hong Kong, another sign that there is no end in sight to the unrest. A downtown rally has turned violent, and the government has pushed back on one of the protesters' key demands. It said Hong Kong residents should understand that any chief executive elected by all citizens shall also be accountable to Beijing. And Venus Williams is out of the Australian Open tennis after losing to 15-year-old Coco Gauff. Gauff has won in straight sets 7-6, 6-3 to secure a place in the second round. Williams was also beaten by Gauff at Wimbledon last summer. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Goins. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Andreas Kluth, who's writing about how liberalism, real, true liberalism in the original European sense, may have the answers to inequality and climate change, like it does seemingly for everything else. Andreas, you're not talking about, I'm an American, so when you say liberalism to me, I think of like lefties, tax the rich, support unions, big government. That's not what you're talking about.
No, you could have added identity politics. That's sort of an American form of collectivism, what you described, which is the opposite of the individualism that's really original liberalism. And in Europe, you have the exact opposite, the mutually exclusive opposite stereotype that liberals or neoliberals are free market fundamentalists. And I'm not talking about either of that. Liberalism actually is started by John Locke, Adam Smith, and then has continued and is alive today, although it seems to be getting sidelined, is this broader, more pragmatic philosophy of basically making sure that we have as much individual freedom as possible, and it is very relevant, I find, even though it seems to have fallen out of the fashion and out of the zeitgeist.
Yeah, is it out of fashion? Because some of the biggest voices we hear from Davos, or are set to hear from Davos this week, will be talking about interventionist industrial policies, managed trade flows, stakeholder, not shareholder capitalism, things that perhaps don't sit with that basic definition of liberalism.
As opposed, exactly as you said. And I mean, Davos is the one place where you'd expect the maximum remaining liberalism to be. But I mean, if you think of even America itself as a mercantilist or protectionist a country now, China is going to authoritarianism. Hungary and Poland have this thing called illiberal democracy, which doesn't even make sense to me. Philippines, Brazil are populist. So it has I call it the loony left, the loony right are the screaming the loudest and are therefore, setting the debate, and the sort of subtler arguments of liberalism, I believe, are getting lost. That's why I wanted to get them out and get people talking about them again.
So it's too long a discussion to have here, but I recommend people check out your column on the Bloomberg. Just type OPIN go. The two major problems you want to tackle, I guess, are inequality, income inequality, or wealth inequality, and climate change. One of the interesting things you bring up is the possibility of a basic income guarantee, which doesn't immediately strike me or anyone as a liberal idea, but you argue that it makes sense.
Well, first of all, I'm not endorsing it. I'm saying in a very liberal way, because we're pragmatic, is we need experiments, we need data. And the experiments that have been done, as in Finland, have been done wrong. And basically, all I'm saying there is the way you liberals think about universal income is not obvious. Some liberals are for it, some are against it. It sounds like big government. It sounds like people would stop working, and that's not necessarily the case. The liberal case would be, remember that a universal basic income, the actual idea, would not complement the welfare state. It would replace the welfare state. Everything you know, Social Security, child benefit, all goes out the window, and you have one system. Everyone gets a very meager, minimal amount. There's zero administration and no fraud because we all get it. And it's just enough to make us survive. So we'd still have to work, but it could get us through adult retraining, education, sickness, all these things. And that's why we need experiments to see, would people stop working or would it work in that way?
Really interesting arguments, really interesting thoughts in this piece, Andreas. And it goes on to talk about climate change and the ways you can tackle that in a decentralized fashion. Really interesting piece. So thank you very much for bringing that to us. Andreas Kluth, Bloomberg Opinion columnist. You can read more on this and other stories from Bloomberg Opinion at bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal by typing OPIN GO. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The incredible shrinking retail footprint is walking right into 2020.
We saw 9,400 stores close this year. That was a record.
Retail Metrics' Ken Perkins on the 2019 total. Credit Suisse thinks 2020 could be even worse, and not just with companies like Pier 1 planning to close about half its stores and Macy's shutting about 30 more. Teen retailer Abercrombie & Fitch says it's ready to walk right out of any mall. Perkins says that could be the right decision.
So many of these retailers have large-sized stores with tons of apparel that just isn't selling.
Smaller format stores could work.
We've seen some real strong success with Target going into particularly college areas and urban areas.
But that might not be as easy or as cost-saving as it sounds.
It requires an investment in logistics, which a lot of retailers might not be able to do.
Malls are finding other uses for that empty space. Doctors' offices, co-working spaces. One mall in Pennsylvania will put a mini casino where a department store used to be. Joan Doniger, Bloomberg Radio.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Investors who put their money on the line to help build U.S. infrastructure deserve to be protected. That's what we do at BAM. Our unconditional guarantee means investors receive every payment of interest and principal when due, period. BAM-insured bonds have a high AA stable rating from S&P, and BAM credit profiles provide complete transparency on each and every transaction. BAM-insured bonds help build America's essential public projects. BAM, the feeling is mutual.
Imagine.
Welcome to Nuffield Health Battersea, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a wide range of equipment and classes, and our expert team will support you to get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night. And somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here. Testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use. And the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closure at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Having to deal with financial stuff can make you feel But at Money Supermarket, we make you feel, That's because we go further to help you get money car. We don't just compare. We cut prices to help you get better car insurance deals. Get money car. Money Supermarket.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Start hearing more of what you want.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations, live commercial-free news, and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the German capital of Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Anna Edwards. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. Matt, European equity markets starting, as you pointed out earlier, fairly positively, but succumbing to the downside.
Yeah, and Leanne tells me also that it's one of the most depressing days. No, today is supposed to be the most depressing day of the year.
Oh, that's it.
Blue
Monday.
We'll find out from her a little bit later why that is. Because I started out the day in a pretty good mood, and we did see futures up this morning, but now the cash trade has turned lower. The FTSE is off 17 points to 76.57. The DAX in Frankfurt is down 20 points to 13,507. So equity indexes are down here, and we also see U.S. futures that have turned down as well. They were okay. The U.S. cash trade won't happen today; they're closed for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. But futures were up earlier and are now down across the board. Where are investors going with their money? Well, you would think that they can't buy treasuries today because the cash trade isn't open. They can, but aren't really buying the yen. It's even right now compared to the close on Friday, but still at a relatively high level. You can buy 110 yen and change for a U.S. dollar. They are buying gold, 1560.36 a troy ounce, and of course, they're still buying oil. Right now, Brent crude is trading at $65.28 a barrel. We're looking at NYMEX WTI that's trading at 58.82. So oil continues to see strength after the Libyan rebels closed down, shut down a lot of production, and in Iraq there's a lot of geopolitical issues shutting down production or limiting production as well. So that's why we see the big gain in oil, and that's probably the main mover to mention in this market today.
Yeah, it's one of the big market-moving stories, and let's talk more about it now, Matt. Libya's oil industry has been caught in the crossfire of the country's civil war. Supporters of Eastern Military Commander Khalifa Haftar blocked exports at ports under his control. It has forced the state-run National Oil Corporation to declare a force majeure and limit the country's oil production to 72,000 barrels per day, down from more than 1.2 million. At the same time, unrest in Iraq threatens two major oil fields there. For more on these stories, let's go live to Dubai, where Bloomberg's Middle East oil reporter Verity Ratcliffe is standing by with us. Good morning to you, Verity. So Haftar met with international leaders yesterday. This meeting took place in Berlin. There were lots of very high-profile interested parties involved. What was the outcome?
Well, yes, they met and essentially they came to no real diplomatic solution. They decided to form a committee of representatives that will be nominated by Haftar and also the internationally recognised Prime Minister to try and hash out some sort of peace agreement. But so far, nothing really came out of that. An agreement may have allowed oil flows to resume as normal. But because that didn't happen, as it stands at the minute, Libya's biggest oil field, Sharara, remains shut in. There's a problem because oil pipelines transporting oil from the centres of production to export have been closed, and also the ports themselves have also been closed. Those under Haftar's control have been shut. But the good news is, I mean, if there were a diplomatic solution found at some point, in theory, they'd be able to start up those flows quite quickly.
I'm here in Berlin, of course. I noticed this weekend that everybody was here because the police basically shut down the entire capital. But I guess the two leaders, the official leader and the rebel leader, didn't meet face to face, and it doesn't seem like there's been a lot of progress.
Yeah, that does seem to be the case. They haven't made a lot of progress, and after previous attempts last week in Russia, it really doesn't look like a solution is imminent. There were hopes that they might reach some sort of a compromise, but it just didn't happen.
Clearly, this has been a chaotic situation, hasn't it? And violent, tragic situation since 2011. We also, from an oil market perspective, I know you're also, Verity, focused on what's been going on in Iraq. And in fact, some in the oil market I read this morning suggesting this could be more significant for oil prices. So what's the story in Iraq?
Yes, essentially what's happening in Iraq is around employment rights. In this case, security guards were seeking permanent employment contracts, so they blocked access to one of the oil fields. And another oil field is also at risk of closing as well. And that's part of a longer narrative that goes back to October or even previous to that, where there have been uprisings and clashes. Since October, around 600 people have died in those protests, which are focused around corruption, poor services, things like that.
What do you see as far as or what is expected as far as the oil price is concerned? Because we've had these big spikes before, Verity, on serious tensions like the Iran conflict last week, and they just dissipate. They just seem to disappear and get smoothed out instantly.
Exactly. As you said earlier, there was a reaction from oil markets. I think it jumped about 1.8%. Brent did an early trading, but it's pared back a little bit. It's significant. It's still over $65 a barrel, but we're just not seeing huge reactions to supply shocks at the minute. This has happened quite a few times in recent months. I think this comes down to longer-term concerns over demand. Inventories are still high, so that's possibly muting the impact of these things a little bit. But I think there's a bigger question to be raised around longer-term trends, because if this continues to be a problem and Middle East supplies are always being disrupted, there might not be investment. And that really doesn't matter so much in Libya, because there's been very little investment or no investment for a long time, for years. It's different in Iraq. In Iraq, over the last few years, they've really hiked their oil-producing capacity, and some had hoped that would continue to be raised even higher. If these concerns mount, it might weigh on investors' minds a little bit.
Okay, Verity, thanks very much for bringing us the analysis, and of course the international context involving US shale producers as well. We've talked about many times. Thanks very much, Bloomberg's Middle East oil reporter Verity Ratcliffe, joining us there from Dubai.
Let's get the world national news headlines now. For that, we go to Leanne Gerrans.
Good morning, Matt. An outbreak of pneumonia in central China has now got even bigger. More than 200 people have been diagnosed with the coronavirus. At least 3 people have died. Health experts say there is evidence that the illness is spreading from people to people. As a global elite gather in Davos for the World Economic Forum, one notable exception is UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He's staying in Britain to remind voters of his new focus on the, quote, people's government. And to reinforce that, it's looking to move the House of Lords out of London. The top candidates, York or Birmingham. Now to Japan. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is expected to open a new sitting in Parliament today with a fresh call to reverse the country's US-imposed pacifist constitution. Bloomberg's Isabel Reynolds has all those details.
Abe has repeatedly said he wants to be the one to bring about the first changes to the document. His plan is to add wording to the pacifist Article 9 to make explicit the constitutionality of what Japan calls its self-defense forces. With opponents inside his own ruling coalition and only 20 months left of his term as party leader, his prospects are doubtful. In Tokyo, Isabel Reynolds, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And finally to Israel, which is installing new technology on its northern border that can detect tunneling by militants into its territory. Bloomberg's Alicia Odenheimer reports.
Drilling began Sunday to place underground sensors that are able to register seismic activity and acoustic noises. Israel said a year ago it had discovered and disabled a series of tunnels dug from Lebanon by Hezbollah, a militant group backed by Iran. In Jerusalem, Elisa Odenheimer, Bloomberg, Daybreak, Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg and on Quick Air by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Thanks very much, Leanne. Now with your morning sports news, here's George Alderman.
Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp still doing his best to play down talk his side have all but secured the Premier League title. Their 2-0 win over Manchester United at Anfield took them 16 points clear at the top of the table, and they have a game in hand. In yesterday's early match, third place Leicester lost 2-1 at Burnley. Holders Celtic face the prospect of an upset in the fifth round of the Scottish Cup. They'll make the trip to League One side Clyde, while their Glasgow rivals Rangers will play away at fellow top-flight team Hamilton next month. Dundee United, or Hibs, who drew 2-2 yesterday, have been drawn against BSC Glasgow in the last 16. England's cricketers will hope to wrap up a big win over South Africa on the final day of the third test. They resume in Port Elizabeth this morning, leading by 188 runs, and with the hosts struggling on 102 for 6 in their second innings. But there's a possibility Joe Root's side could be frustrated by rain. Victory would put them 2-1 up in the 4-match series. Coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, bankers and billionaires descend on Davos as strategists warn of a peak decade in globalization, capitalism, inequality, internal combustion engines, oil demand. You name it. We'll hear our interview from BlackRock's Philip Hildebrand next. And you can listen back to a selection of our interviews at BloombergRadio.com or on your Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, it's me, your cell phone. We need to talk about something serious. I know you love me, I know you like using me wherever you are, but I feel like this isn't working out when you're driving. I know you may think that it's possible to focus both on me and the road, but I just don't feel the same way. I think we should spend time away from each other when you're driving. It's for the best.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
More than just a game, baseball is big business. For the Atlanta Braves, this meant bringing a $1 billion stadium project to life through a public partnership, creating the Battery, a mixed-use development that turned an underdeveloped area into a thriving community.
Always on the cutting edge of community development, Cohn Resnick advises industry participants on tax credits, affordable housing, opportunity zones, and more, helping communities reach their full potential. Explore more at cohnresnick.com/MLB. Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at bevel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Why has J.D. Power ranked common?
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30 gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
I've got my own place now, Money. My parents put up the 10% security. And when I keep up my repayments, they get it back with interest in 5 years from Barclays. And now we can do whatever we want. Right, Dave? We don't have to tiptoe up the stairs. I can paint the living room purple. Don't look at me like that, Money. It's my house. Barclays Family Springboard Mortgage. Make money work for you.
Your home may be repossessed if mortgage payments are missed. Deposit returned with interest after 5 years if no repayments missed. Subject to application, financial circumstances and borrowing history. T's and C's apply.
Hello, I'm your captain for today's Virgin Atlantic flight. Please drop everything and pay close attention to the following announcement. The sail is now on. Our crew are ready to take your bags and stresses away. The cocktails are ready to serve, the movies are loaded, and we're all set for takeoff to the Caribbean. So, take your seat in our award-winning economy class. We're ready to go when you are.
The Virgin Atlantic sail. Fly amazing for less. For more details, visit virginatlantic.com.
Chilly January days in London are tough enough without a broken boiler. Keep your home warm and working this winter with 2 years interest-free credit and your boiler installed by one of our expert engineers. Plus, you'll get a 5-year British Gas warranty. And we can even quote by video call after work or on weekends. Get a quote by the 29th of February, and you can also get £200 off a new boiler, or £400 off for our existing home care customers. Search British Gas New Boiler. Conditions apply.
Hey, it's me again, the TV. Since my family gave me Now TV, there's no more endlessly searching for something they want to watch, because now I don't do filler TV, just killer TV. If my family want movies, I've got blockbusters. Football? How about the Premier League? Or crime dramas? I've got loads. And they're never going to guess who did it. Now they can watch whatever they're in the mood for.
What's your TV got for you tonight? Now TV. 18 plus, month passes auto-renew, terms apply.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
On this week's On the Media, we peel away the many layers of the Warren Sanders sexism sideshow.
The first layer is, can we acknowledge that in a country that has only elected male presidents throughout its history, that gender is a factor?
Also, depressed by politics? We have a plan for that. Listen to On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So we are seeing the losses on the US stock 600 slightly decline, but we're still down 0.2%. US equity futures also drifting lower. Although, of course, it's a public holiday in the US. US equity and bond markets closed for Martin Luther King Day. FTSE 100 also declining 0.1%. In terms of what we're seeing, Deutsche Bank right now is down this morning, currently off by 2.6%, as it's said to be cutting its bonus pool. So that's one of the big decliners. Also, Into Properties, considering an equity raise, the Into Property share price drops by 9.2%. So those are some of the big individual stocks that we're looking at in Europe. The other big story is the oil market. So Libya and Iraq, supply disruptions there mean that we have seen a big jump in oil prices, although even that jump of around 2% that we saw earlier today seems to have eased off. WTI crude futures trade at $58.77, Brent crude at $65.14, so both up by 0.4%. On the currency markets, Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index strengthens 0.1%. The British pound continues to slump this morning, down 0.3% at 1.2969. And the euro trades at 1.1087. As for the bond markets, of course, because the US is shut, there's been kind of less propulsion in the markets. German yields at negative 20 basis points, so just nudging a little bit higher in terms of yields. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with all the world and national news. Good morning.
Caroline, good morning. The two sides in President Trump's impeachment trial have previewed their arguments House Democrats and the president's legal team filed their first formal briefs over the weekend. Democrats say the president's pattern of misconduct made him a threat to the nation and the rule of law. The president's lawyers called the impeachment an attempt to overturn the 2016 election. That trial begins tomorrow. The world's richest 1% have more than twice the wealth of the rest of humanity combined. That's according to Oxfam. Let's put it another way. Just over 2,100 people have more money than $4.5 billion. The UK-based charity says governments are massively undertaxing rich individuals and corporations and underfunding public services. And finally, today is apparently the most depressing day of the year. It's been coined Blue Monday. It is said to be the most depressing day of the year due to a number of things, including cold weather, post-festive blues, and with a while to go until payday. But a number of activities and events have been planned across the country to raise awareness and provide mental health support. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Yeah, payday does feel like it's still a long way away, right?
I feel like I've actually counted the days to payday.
But here in London, the sun's been out this weekend.
Oh,
and it's been beautiful. So if you're feeling gloomy, if you're feeling that Blue Monday, focus on that.
Go out for a walk.
If you're here, obviously.
Yes.
You can't speak for
there.
Berlin.
Not here where it's 0 degrees and cloudy and overcast. But
you've no hope then.
Right, it's over. It's all over for us. Listen, as Leanne was telling us, a ton of people, I think she said like 2,000 people are each, is this the case, each individually richer than the lowest 60% of, did I understand that right?
It's 2,100 people.
Yes.
You know what I've done? I've just logged off my computer.
No. I heard you. 2,100 and some people
are richer than 4 billion people.
I see. So not each one of those people individually, but as a group.
In
any case,
2,100 people have more money than $4.5 billion. There we go.
Right. Yeah. So the interesting thing is when the timing of this release from Oxfam, if I recall your report, a lot of these people. Probably a huge chunk of these people are going to Davos this week for the World Economic Forum. There will be 119 billionaires going to Davos in their private jets flying over the Alps that used to get snow at this time of year. Strategists are warning clients to brace for what Eurasia Group founder Ian Bremmer is calling a groundbreaking peak decade. Peak globalization, peak capitalism, peak inequality that will disrupt business and investing. Earlier this hour, Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix spoke with BlackRock Vice Chairman Phil Hildebrand and asked him how clients have reacted to his call for more sustainability.
I think clients have been telling us for a while that this is an important issue. They've recognized that climate risk is investment risk. Sustainability risks are ultimately investment risks, whether it's through flooding, physical events, regulatory development. So they've understood, and they've been calling for this in a sense to help them get ahead of these trends and recognize that we need to, as a fiduciary, respond to the fact that climate risk has become an investment risk.
Do you see competitors in the industry following suit? Will there be a real significant and sizable change?
We believe so. We believe this is, Larry said it in his letter, this is really a fundamental reshaping of finance. I think we're at the very beginning of a significant shift in finance, and we hope as a firm, as a large firm, that we can make a difference. Perhaps we can be an accelerator, an amplifier, but this is happening anyhow, so I think we want to get ahead of it on behalf of our clients and be there for them.
What would be your biggest challenge in it? So BlackRock is mainly, in large, a provider of index products, so how do you translate sustainability in those?
Well, we have, as you know, we have both. We have a large active platform, we have a large index platform, and I think the key there is that we work very closely, increasingly closely, with the providers of indices to make sure that the index providers also move in that direction. They've been doing that for some time, so I think you'll find if you talk here to the index providers, they are very much on board with this. They recognize the indices have to change, and that will then allow this very significant shift in capital. We think this is going to entail a major reallocation of capital towards more sustainable investing.
What have you been hearing from chief executives executives? Are they worried that their businesses will be affected by climate change sooner than they thought 2 years ago?
Well, I think like all big changes, it's always an opportunity and a risk. But I think, with few exceptions, it's also very clear that almost all CEOs recognize that this is a reality. This is happening. So the question is, how do you adapt your business model to these changes? In some cases, it can be a great opportunity. In other cases, it will be a challenge. But there are very few people who today feel that they can simply ignore this topic.
Have you had many discussions with chief executives of companies that you're invested in a way forward to push sustainability in again, something that's sizable, that's just not talk?
Absolutely. And this has been a big part of the initiative that we launched last week, that we want to be much more transparent how we engage with the companies, also, frankly, be much more transparent how we vote. And we've made it clear that we expect companies to live up to disclosure responsibilities based on SASB or TCFD, but basically make sure that we have the information, that the market has the information that allows investors to judge where companies are with regard to climate risk.
Is there a risk that this push towards sustainability goes down the drain if we see a recession?
No, I mean, look, over time, in the very long term, there may be watering down of these return potentials that you have in sustainability, but I think this is a major shift that's just about to happen. This is no different than some of the shifts we've seen related to the baby boom after the war. So we really believe this is a fundamental reshaping of finance that will entail significant reallocation of capital and relative price changes. And so in the short to medium term, this is an opportunity from an investment perspective to get better performance and not a problem.
That was Philip Hildebrand from BlackRock talking to Francine Lacroix.
Now let's cross over to Bloomberg economics correspondent Michelle Jamrisko to get more on what could be the hot talking points at the World Economic Forum this year. And Michelle, I know our team has been looking at some of the setup to Davos coming out of Bank of America, talking about a groundbreaking peak decade. Ian Bremner at Eurasia talking about a tipping point. Is there a sense that a dam is about to burst here, that we are on the brink of big change?
Well, I think a lot of those that are gathered for Davos would like to believe that. Of course, they're always talking about these big issues every year, and this year is a little bit different in terms of the flavor being kind of centered on income inequality and climate change, and as you mentioned, ESG is sort of a buzzword or buzz acronym this year. I think there is a lot of talk though about these longer run changes that are going to take quite some time. I think the criticism of gatherings like these is that it is just talk, that this is a response to the demands of many in the global economy that for years have been calling for more equality on wealth, and earlier you played some of the statistics around that. The populist fervor has not faded. It's alive and well, and we can see that in protests all over the world. So I think it's on some of those gathered at Davos to talk in concrete detail, as you heard Hildebrand from BlackRock just do. But we'll see. I mean, on both the income inequality side as well as the ESG and climate change, there's a lot to discuss, and I'm sure we'll have no shortage of discussion around those topics and more in the days ahead.
Right, and previously we've heard at Davos also a call for a return to globalization, as leaders there were concerned that everyone was sort of turning inward. You think they've given up on that?
I don't know that that's the hot topic anymore. I think there's actually a debate in the economic sphere that globalization isn't really dying; it's evolving, as some of my colleagues in Washington put it. So there are things about services trade and the digital economy that show that there are still very much embedded ties across boundaries via trade and other channels. So it does show that globalization is still alive and well in some senses, but it's just measured in a different way, and it needs to be tackled in a different way. So I think one area where we see this is tax policy, and that really brings in a lot of these issues as far as income inequality and trade and others.
Michelle, thanks very much for your time. Michelle Jamrisko from our Bloomberg Economics team. World Economic Forum, of course, coverage continues here on Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg.
Inovalon is a leading...
Take the helm and ignite your spirit of adventure with a Sunsail holiday. Relax on a skippered yacht from sunny St. Lucia to the nutmeg-scented shores of Grenada. Or take charge with a bareboat charter along Dubrovnik's glittering coastline. With up to 20% off selected destinations, Now is the time to book your Sunsail adventure. Sunsail. See the world differently.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sail. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30 gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
At TUI, we're spreading sunshine early by giving away hundreds of thousands of free kids' places. So you can holiday with the little ones for less. Book today and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. From splash parks to swimming lessons. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Direct debit on web bookings only. Free kids' places subject to limited availability. One free child place per 2 full paying adults. Booking T's and C's apply. At all protected.
Today at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. We have to get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Impeachment trial tactics, gun rally threat, and Barbara Cusack. Both sides are having their say ahead of opening statements on Tuesday in President Trump's impeachment trial.
Alan Dershowitz, a member of President Trump's defense team, raised some eyebrows when he said Sunday that a president cannot be impeached and removed from office for abuse of power, which is one of the 2 articles of impeachment against the president. The other is obstruction of Congress.
Well, I was surprised to see Alan Dershowitz say that. That's simply ignorance.
Jerry Nadler, one of the House impeachment managers or prosecutors in the case, speaking on CBS's Face the Nation.
It's ridiculous.
Linda Kenyon, Washington.
2 Honolulu police officers were killed as they responded to a call at a home near Waikiki Beach.
Police Chief Susan Ballard says suspect Jerry Hennell is accused of stabbing a woman, shooting at the officers, and setting fire to a house that spread throughout a neighborhood.
HPD has opened investigations into 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree assault, and multiple counts of first-degree attempted murder.
I'm John Lawrence reporting.
Texas authorities say a manhunt is underway after 2 people were killed, 5 others injured in a San Antonio club shooting. In Kansas City, Missouri, 2 people were killed and more than a dozen injured in a shooting outside a bar. Correspondent Nick Valencia reports that concern has mounted over the potential of violence at today's gun rights rally in Virginia that's expected to draw a mix of militias, firearm advocates, and white supremacists to Richmond.
A source in the Virginia State Police Department tells me that over the course of the weekend, there was an increase in threats on law enforcement, specifically on the social media pages of the Richmond Police Department as well as the Virginia State Police. There are some individuals, pro-gun rights individuals, who are expected to attend that are no longer because they fear something bad could happen.
The Korean thriller Parasite became the first foreign language film to win the top prize of Best Cast Ensemble in the 26-year history of the Screen Actors Guild Awards. I'm Barbara Cusack.
This is Ground Game with me, Julie Pace, AP's Washington Bureau Chief. You've been digging into Mayor Pete's fundraising for quite some time. Just let's step back to start. How unusual is what he has been able to do? Original, unbiased, the news you need as America prepares for the 2020 election. Listen and subscribe to Ground Game, free, from the Westwood One Podcast Network, where the conversation starts.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you. Printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-501-3689 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-501-3689 for your free author submission kit. Again, 800-501-3689.
A Texas mayor has a special message this Martin Luther King Jr. holiday.
Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson is proclaiming 2020 a year of nonviolence in the city. He says the MLK holiday is an appropriate time for the proclamation after a year of increasing violent crime in Dallas.
The perfect moment for us to send a message to our entire city.
He says of the 200-plus murders in Dallas last year, too many involved people of color.
136 of the 209 were African American, 51 were Hispanic.
Johnson calling on police and the community to work together to reduce violent crime. Clayton Neville, Dallas.
American Coco Gauff is just 15, but she now owns 2 victories at a Grand Slam over 39-year-old Venus Williams. Gauff has moved into the second round at the Australian Open by beating Williams in straight sets. I'm Barbara Cusack.
And I'm Mark Mills in the Bloomberg Radio Newsroom. This newscast is brought to you by SEI. Asset managers can exceed new thresholds for data management, reporting, and responsiveness. Transform your business with SEI's global operating platform at SEIC.com/IMS. U.S. financial markets will be closed for the Martin Luther King holiday. International markets are trading on this Monday. European stocks have edged lower. Asian markets finished mixed. U.S. stock futures are drifting as investors wait for a fresh batch of earnings reports this week. In Europe, the FTSE 100 in London down about 0.2%. The DAX in Germany is off less than 0.1%. The CAC 40 in Paris off about 1/3%. Japan's Nikkei rose 0.2%. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong off 0.9%. The CSI 300 in China gaining 0.75% in Monday trading. Crude oil rose 0.4% Monday following supply disruptions in Libya and Iraq. Gold climbing 0.2%. Hong Kong protests continued over the weekend with tear gas fired, 2 plainclothes police officers beaten, and 8 people arrested for possession of batons, hammers, or spanners. Hong Kong International Airport's passenger numbers fell for the first time in a decade last year as months of anti-government protests deterred people from coming to the city. Bloomberg's Stephen Engel in Hong Kong reports that months of protests are taking a toll.
Many economists we've spoken to, including at Bloomberg Intelligence, expect the wave of joblessness to rise steadily in 2020 as the retail sector, logistics, trade, etc., start to feel the brunt of now 7 months of protests.
President Donald Trump championed the China trade deal and passage of the USMCA at a farm convention Sunday in Austin, Texas, saying the 2 momentous trade deals we completed last week are just the beginning of a really incredible story. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Mark Mills. This is Bloomberg.
Thank you so much for joining us for this holiday edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. The stock market is closed on this Martin Luther King Day. I'm Nathan Hager. Over the next hour, we will talk about whether 2 of the hottest stocks around can keep it up in 2020. We look at the future of Apple and Tesla with Gene Munster, co-founder of Loop Ventures. But first, we are coming off a week which saw a slew of bank earnings, and to help us look at what's in store for financials this year, we're pleased to welcome Allison Williams, Senior Financial Services Analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. Wow, what a week for Wall Street banks, Allison. They just put on a tear in the fourth quarter.
Yes, we started off with a bang. JP Morgan coming out with extremely strong fixed income trading numbers, well above estimates. Yes, that compares to a weak year ago, but the quarter also very strong. And then we sort of saw that echoed across the board. And then we ended the week with Morgan Stanley, who raised their profitability targets above consensus estimates and also implying some upside from their 2019 results, which met their former target.
Was this a big surprise, particularly in fixed income, for just about all of the banks to outperform as much as they did?
It is a surprise, the degree of outperformance. Expectations were for big gains, again, just compared to a weak year ago. And then we did see pockets of strength in the quarter, but the banks really citing broad strength and really significant upside to the numbers. Some of the areas that were called out, U.S. rates with some of the Fed activity in the domestic market was helpful. So that's not necessarily a read-through to some of the European banks, which kick off tomorrow with UBS. But credit trading and securitization strength was also an area cited by Morgan Stanley and some others, and that is an area where banks, especially Credit Suisse, may see some benefit.
Are the banks expecting the Fed to remain accommodative in a way that allows them to continue the kind of growth that they've seen in the fixed income space?
Across the banks, there are a couple that noted that they expect the Fed to potentially cut one more time. Some of what's been happening with repo facilities remains a bit of a question. I think the biggest upside to fixed income trading can come for the banks if we get a little bit more volatility. So we have volatility across a number of measures at very low levels, and that tends to happen when you have monetary policy convergence to lower rates, as we sort of learned last decade. And so that tends to hamper client activity, client opportunities. So if we did get some kind of unexpected surprise, that could be helpful to fixed income. It should be noted that even though we had sort of these big gains this quarter, we're still ending the decade on sort of a low note for the markets overall. Equity trading was a little bit more mixed across the companies. We saw strength in cash and prime. That's a business where Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, and Goldman are all very strong. Morgan Stanley was flat overall in equities for the quarter, whereas the other two gained. And that's because we're seeing weakness in the equity derivatives business. And so that has provided some offset, and we saw declines at Bank of America and Citi really based on that.
When you have that kind of offset, how do the financials navigate that balance between equities trading and the fixed income space, particularly some of the more diversified banks on Wall Street?
For all the banks that we just spoke of, they do have diversified franchises, so perhaps differences across the banks, but they all do have a presence in the businesses, and that obviously can be helpful. For example, in 2018, in the first half, we saw really strong equities. In the fourth quarter of 2018, as I noted, we saw very weak FICC. And then this quarter, strong FICC, weaker equities. But obviously having a diversified mix is helpful. The other place where we saw mixed results was in banking fees, debt underwriting performing well, equity underwriting also doing better, M&A fees down versus a very strong quarter last year, but with the announced volumes, we do expect that that's going to carry through to some strength in early 2020.
Do you think cost cutting is going to continue to be part of the story? I mean, we saw those pretty eye-popping numbers, particularly from Morgan Stanley on that front.
Cost cutting really is the story for as long as there is sort of the amount of revenue uncertainty that we've spoken about. So in the fourth quarter, what the banks benefited really from was a turn in client sentiment and sort of risk on. However, because geopolitics remains fluid, trade remains, and Brexit and other issues are still out there, there is the potential to see some disruption in markets. And I think the other point for the U.S. banks is that we are late in the cycle. And for banks globally, we spoke about low rates. We have negative rates in several countries. And so to the extent that we have this environment, costs really make a difference. And again, this was a story across the banks. Wells Fargo is a company where there's very little visibility on very elevated costs. And obviously there are some unique issues there, but I would put them at one end of the spectrum. Whereas Citigroup coming out and really committing to costs, feeling that they can get operating leverage with some revenue growth. Bank of America, which has been getting operating leverage, but talked about their net interest income being challenged a little bit in the first half. And while expenses are going to be higher in the first quarter, there's some seasonal issues there. But just sort of those two factors put together, putting a little bit of pressure in the very near term, and investors really focused on that.
Allison Williams, Senior Financial Services Analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. Thanks for this. We appreciate you joining us. Up next on this holiday edition of Bloomberg Daybreak, we talk Apple and Tesla with one of the preeminent analysts around, Gene Munster of Loop Ventures. It is 13 minutes past the hour. I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.
business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
This is the Bloomberg Green Business Report. Remember the days when flying was a way to elevate yourself to that lofty place where the air was rarefied?
Come fly with me, let's fly away.
These days, there's a small but growing movement to shun air travel's high levels of greenhouse gas emissions. In 2013, commercial carriers emitted 710 million tons of carbon dioxide. Last year, that figure reached 927 million tons, more like an industrial country like Germany. And that's creating a climate of guilt for some air travelers, moving some toward transportation that's viewed as less polluting, such as rail travel. Airlines argue that increasingly efficient planes now use about the same amount of fuel per passenger as a half-full car. But experts say because the number of planes in the sky could double in 20 years as economies and the population grow, clean flying on a mass scale is decades away.
Weather-wise, it's such a lovely...
That's the Bloomberg Green Business Report. I'm Bob Moon.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Run. Skip. Run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run. Lift. Splash. Skip. Lift. Run. It's crunch time. Skip. Mix it up. Run. Mix it out of boxing class. Skip. Run. Splash. Skip. Run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing until March. T's and C's apply. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Mix it. Run. Mix it.
At the Bank of Santander, they've created Stan, a smart bot that can predict the future of remortgaging.
All right, Stan, will my mortgage rate go up?
1955 was the last time Newcastle won the cup.
No, and try not to mumble.
Playing, let's get ready to rumble.
Oh.
Meanwhile, at Santander, they can't predict your future, but they'll help secure it with great mortgage rates fixed for up to 10 years. See what's possible at Santander.
Early repayment charges apply. Lending subject to status and criteria. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
On a TUI tour, our English-speaking local guides will take you off the tourist trail. They won't just help you find the perfect souvenir, they'll show you how to make it. Choose from over 70 unforgettable tours worldwide. From tranquil temples in India to sunrise safaris in South Africa. On a TUI tour, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Book now and enjoy up to £200 off per booking. Booking T's and C's and minimum spend applies. Selected holidays only. At all protected.
Back to this special Martin Luther King edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. Markets are closed for the holiday. I'm Nathan Hager. We now turn our focus to two stocks that have been on a tear, Apple and Tesla. We begin with the electric car maker. Tesla CEO Elon Musk was quite literally dancing on the stage when he opened his company's new gigafactory in Shanghai.
We could not have achieved this goal without the support from all levels of government in China.
especially the Shanghai local government.
And investors seem to be sharing Musk's enthusiasm, driving the stock above $500 a share for the first time just last week, and only seeming to go higher from there. For more, we're pleased to be joined by the co-founder of Loop Ventures, Gene Munster. Always good talking tech with you, Gene. And it's funny to think that just, 7 months ago, Tesla was at a low of $177 a share. But you've been bullish on this company for some time. Are you still?
Nathan, we are. And ultimately, we view Tesla as playing into two undeniable truths. One around the future of cars are going to be electric, and they're the market share leader by a wide margin. And second is the future of automotive and vehicles will be autonomous. And there's a debate whether and how much they'll play into that. But the big reason why we are still optimistic about the story is that they play into those two levels. The market cap now is reaching $100 billion. So one of the key questions we have is this move justified? Can this be a much bigger company? I think that there is a reasonable case that this could be a much bigger company.
You mentioned two factors why you think Tesla's future is still bright, one of them being the share of the electric vehicle market. Can Tesla continue to maintain its dominance in this space when you have Ford, GM, and Volkswagen making aggressive moves toward EV?
I think it's unlikely that they can maintain the same share, but I think that they can have an outsized market share for the automotive industry. So to put some perspective around that, in the U.S., Tesla has about 70% of the electric car market. Last year, in 2019, it was about 3% of total cars sold in the U.S. Globally, their EV market share is much lower because about 70% of EVs come from China, and those are very low-cost EVs. But the concept of Tesla 10 years from now having called 15% or better market share is globally is a very real possibility, which would kind of put it on par with the biggest car companies' market shares today with GM and Toyota. And so to answer your questions, we think that their market share will decline, undoubtedly, but still be more higher market share than we have seen with typical automotive companies. And the reason why, there's a structural reason why that they can maintain this high market share is that making electric cars is different than making traditional internal combustion engines, vehicles powered by that. And the fundamentals around battery construction and the technology that goes into it, this is more like a computer on wheels. And so there is some scale advantages that Tesla has built over the last 10 years that make it difficult for traditional automotive companies to build electric cars in a cost-effective way. And that ultimately means that traditional automotive companies, if they want to gain market share, they are going to have to sell more electric vehicles at a subsidized rate. And these businesses, traditional automotive, tend to be lower margin businesses. And so it puts them in a tight spot. And ultimately, we think that financial consideration, those financial difficulties of traditional automotive, will pave the way for Tesla to have an outsized market share in the EV market a decade from now.
All this leads to the fundamental question whether it can actually meet its numbers. What is your outlook for whether Tesla will be able to maintain a steady supply of vehicles?
So we're comfortable with them exceeding the street expectations of 463,000 cars in 2020. Now, put that in perspective, there's 90 million cars sold globally, cars and light trucks sold globally. So 463, that will be up about 30% from 2019. And part of the reason why is what's happening with China and their gigafactory. So they basically started construction on that a year ago. They're delivering cars from that. They are producing cars at a pace of 3,000 per week. Most analysts think that for 2020, Tesla will deliver somewhere between 40 and 100,000 vehicles from that China factory. But if you assume that they can continue the current pace of production at 3,000 per week and that there is demand to fill that, which is a debatable question, that would be 150,000 vehicles, well above the high end of the expectation. So there is this powerful tailwind. That's the big opportunity. Now, people who are less optimistic about the Tesla story will point to in 2020, there is going to be elimination of the U.S. EV tax credit, which was about $1,900 most recently. And so they would say that that's a headwind and that these numbers are actually in jeopardy. We're in the camp that they will exceed that number based on what's going on in China.
You mentioned Tesla aiming toward a $100 billion valuation. As we've said, the stock itself has been on a tear. What's to say that Tesla doesn't crash just as hard as it's shot up, given the volatility we've seen in this stock over the last several years?
You should plan that there's going to be some sort of pullback. It could be a dramatic pullback. I'm a firm believer that this company is going to be successful, but I also believe what's happened with shares is best defined most recently, the last 6 months, is euphoric. Typically, when you have that, you can have some major pullbacks. That could be 10, 20% type of pullbacks. So investors should structurally prepare for those type of pullbacks. But for the long-term investor who is thinking about those undeniable truths that we had talked about earlier, you can build a case that that this company could have 15% of the global market share. And if you assume a $40,000 per vehicle with that 15% share, you can build a case that they will have $350 billion per year in revenue in the next decade. And that company that has $350 billion in revenue, that is a combination of hardware, software, and services, which is what Tesla is, very similar to Apple. You should drive a market cap higher than call it $100 billion today. So right now, Apple, that same combination, hardware, software, and services, much better company, but just structurally has some similarities there. That trades at 4 times that revenue multiple. So you can see how an investor, despite the risk of a big pullback, can still feel there's some comfort and confidence that this could be a much bigger company.
Gene Munster, Loop Ventures co-founder, stay with us. I want to continue this conversation on Apple as well as some of your other tech predictions for this year. That's straight ahead on this Martin Luther King Day edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. It is 25 minutes past the hour. I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
In the real world, there are no rabbits in hats, crystal balls.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run, run, run. Mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up, lift. Mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run. Mix it out of boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing until March. T's and C's apply. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Mix it. Run.
Mix it. Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
I've got my own place now, Money. My parents put up the 10% security. And when I keep up my repayments, they get it back with interest in 5 years from Barclays. And now we can do whatever we want. Right, Dave? We don't have to tiptoe up the stairs. I can paint the living room purple. Don't look at me like that, Money. It's my house. Barclays Family Springboard Mortgage. Make money work for you.
Your home may be repossessed if mortgage payments are missed. Deposit returned with interest after 5 years if no repayments missed. Subject to application, financial circumstances and borrowing history. T's and C's apply.
Hello, I'm here at the Race for Life Pretty Muddy with Great Britain's Jayanti Kaur. Jayanti, do you have a message for the millions tuned in at home?
What are you talking about? Millions of people aren't tuning in to witness me doing a muddy obstacle course.
Well, they absolutely should, Jayanti. You're a remarkable athlete.
I'm a geography teacher.
We're not athletes, we're cancer beaters. Sign up to Race for Life now and get 30% off entry until the 31st of January in partnership with Tesco.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Adam Schiff is accusing U.S. intelligence agencies of withholding documents from Congress on Ukraine that could be significant to President Trump's impeachment trial. State officials warn of potential for violence at today's gun rights rally in Virginia's state capitol. Correspondent Nick Valencia.
A source in the Virginia State Police Department tells me that over the course of the weekend, there was an increase in threats on law enforcement, specifically on the social media pages of the Richmond Police Department as well as the Virginia State Police. But there are some individuals, pro-gun rights individuals, who are expected to attend that are no longer because they fear something bad could happen.
The San Francisco 49ers are in the Super Bowl after cruising to a 37-20 win over the Green Bay Packers. The 49ers will play the Kansas City Chiefs, who beat the Tennessee Titans 35-24. And in Kansas City, Missouri, at least 2 people are dead. A dozen people may have been injured in a shooting outside a bar. I'm John Trout.
And I'm Mark Mills in the Bloomberg Radio Newsroom. U.S. financial markets are observing the Martin Luther King holiday. International exchanges are open. We'll have the numbers in a moment. Amid the alpine peaks of the Swiss resort of Davos in the week ahead, politicians, investors, and executives will be busy debating whether we are witnessing peaks in key drivers of the world economy, from oil demand, car production, and the proportion of young people as a share of the population, to less measurable themes like globalization, inequality, and central banking power. There's an argument each will diminish in the coming decade. President Trump plans to attend the Davos Forum. Ford, LG, and Pernod Ricard are now among the top global companies best prepared for the effects of climate change. More on that from Bloomberg's Denise Pellegrini.
The nonprofit CDP gives the 3 companies an A grade for how aggressive they are in setting carbon goals and also how forthcoming they are about those efforts. Only 2% of the 8,400 companies CDP looked at got that grade. Alphabet, Walmart, and Citigroup among them. At 38, Japan had the most companies on the A list, followed by 35 in the United States. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Radio.
A pneumonia outbreak in central China has widened, with more than 200 people now diagnosed with the new SARS-like virus. As health experts say, there's now evidence the illness is spreading from person to person. Scientists are searching and testing for the novel virus among people with symptoms like fever and coughing. With the Chinese New Year just days away, a time of heavy traveling and family gatherings, the virus's spread may intensify. Checking the markets, the FTSE in London is down 0.3%. The DAX in Germany off about 0.1%. Japan's Nikkei closed up 0.2%. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong off 0.9%. The CSI 300 in China gaining 0.75%. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Mark Mills. This is Bloomberg.
We're so glad you joined us for this holiday edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. U.S. markets are closed for Martin Luther King Day. I'm Nathan Hager, and we continue our conversation now with Gene Munster, co-founder of Loop Ventures. We talked about Tesla earlier, Gene. Let's move on to Apple. And you, of course, were one of the very first analysts to be a bull on Apple, talking more than 15 years ago, and the stock has been the best performing in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, last year surging more than 86%. Can Apple maintain that?
On a percentage basis, it's highly unlikely, but in terms of if you look at the other FANG names, I think Apple will outperform those. $350 would be a base case for this year, and $450 is a realistic case for sometime next year. The groundwork for Apple over the next 3 to 4 years is surprisingly a greenfield. There's some tailwinds that historically the company has kind of this boom and bust evolution around their product cycles. But what we're going into over the next few years, specifically around 5G, I think sets the framework that this could be a continued move higher in Apple shares. So despite the move recently, we're still very optimistic about the story.
There has been a lot of talk about 5G, of course. What's got you thinking Apple is better positioned than its competitors on the next generation of mobile?
I would say Apple is probably the best investment play around 5G, in part because just over half their revenue is iPhone, which there's the natural upgrade cycle. And separately is there's other pieces of their business, whether it's wearables or services, that also are positively impacted by 5G. It may be worth pausing and just putting some definitions around 5G. It's faster data to your smartphone, which is typically it's going to be somewhere between 5 and 10 times faster than your current phone, which is nice for starting videos, but that's not the real opportunity around 5G. At its core, it will allow mobile phones to tap into cloud-scale computing. So your phone can use processing in the cloud, and you won't even know that it's being done in the cloud. That's how fast the connection speeds are, which opens up significant new avenues in terms of what you can use your phone for. Artificial intelligence is built into different applications. Augmented reality, the future of autonomy and transportation plays into that. But Apple ultimately has a play which will be a juicy opportunity for investors or for consumers for their tech experience to improve. And so, but this is going to take a few years for this really to roll out. So I think it's that is the opportunity around Apple stock, is that whenever you have these multiple year opportunities, it gets investors more optimistic.
You know, with the focus on 5G, it puts a lot of attention back on the products that Apple has become so famous for putting out, the iPhones, the AirPods you mentioned, Apple Watch. It was only a few months ago we were talking about Apple needing to make a pivot toward services. Is the company striking the balance now?
Feels like it. And, you know, you've had the iPhone as a percentage of revenue was almost 70% a few years ago. Now it's going to be 53%. And the reason in 2020, the reason why is that services and wearables have been growing quickly, call it close to 20 and 30% respectively over the last few years. And so I think that they are striking that balance of really bringing together what is kind of a comprehensive consumer tech experience. So the only company that can do that, typically when you buy tech, whether it's some sort of a wearable, your phone, the services, you kind of have to piece it together. I think that the balance that Apple has struck and where they're really resonating is everything just works together nicely. And for consumers who don't want the headache of trying to manage these different experiences, Apple makes it easy for them. And I think that's going to be one of their fundamental winning strategies.
I want to get to some of your other tech predictions. What's standing out for you in the tech space?
One is that if you think about what Amazon is doing this year, they are going to continue their push into traditional brick and mortar. We think that this year they'll add 50 additional brick and mortar stores. Ultimately, that is a sign that they keep expanding their business beyond just online. And second is an area that I've been wrong on, which is what's going to happen with Netflix. And the prediction is actually that it's positive for Netflix. I've been relatively negative on the name because the greater competition from Disney and Apple and the streaming services. But I think that they'll actually meet their expectations for net sub ads in 2020 of, call it, 26 million globally. Ultimately, Apple streaming and Disney through the promotions are basically free today. And so I don't think consumers really need to make any decisions whether to keep Netflix or not. 2021 may be a different conversation when people actually have to start making some decisions about which services they keep. But Netflix making their paid net sub ads is another important prediction we have for 2020.
It never hurts to stay nimble as we look ahead to the future. Our thanks to Gene Munster, co-founder of Loop Ventures, for joining us on this holiday edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. Still ahead, we look at what's ahead for the Fed and the economy in 2020. It's 39 minutes past the hour. I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute.
Take the helm and ignite your spirit of adventure with a Sunsail holiday. Relax on a skippered yacht from sunny St. Lucia to the nutmeg-scented shores of Grenada. Or take charge with a bareboat charter along Dubrovnik's glittering coastline. With up to 20% off selected destinations, now is the time to book your Sunsail adventure. Sunsail. See the world differently.
Boredom. Fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. 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 Mix it up. Skip. Run. Skip. Run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run. Lift. Splash. Skip. Lift. Run. It's crunch time. Skip. Mix it up. Run. Mix it out of boxing class. Skip. Run. Splash. Skip. Run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing until March. T's and C's apply. Run. Mix it up. Mix it. Run. Mix it.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30 gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Peoples of London. Cooking for family and friends is a real hassle, Sergey tells me. So I, Alexander, occasionally take care of marvelous dinner for whole family. Which means we all go out for meerkat meals. Exactly. How did you guess? Get 2 for 1 on food for up to 6 people at your local favorites, like Grill Shack with meerkat meals. When you buy, so compare the market. Qualifying purchase, app only, 2 for 1 on selected food, participating restaurants, a la carte only, Sunday to Thursday, T's and C's and exclusions apply.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Michael Bloomberg, a Democratic presidential candidate, is the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, parent of Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update. Now the news.
Democratic Representative Adam Schiff is accusing U.S. intelligence agencies of withholding documents from Congress on Ukraine that could be significant to President Trump's impeachment trial. State officials warn of potential for violence at today's gun rights rally in Virginia's state capitol. Correspondent Nick Valencia.
A source in the Virginia State Police Department tells me that over the course of the weekend, there was an increase in threats on law enforcement, specifically on the social media pages of the Richmond Police Department as well as the Virginia State Police. But there are some individuals, pro-gun rights individuals, who are expected to attend that are no longer because they fear something bad could happen.
The San Francisco 49ers are in the Super Bowl after cruising to a 37-20 win over the Green Bay Packers. The 49ers will play the Kansas City Chiefs, who beat the Tennessee Titans 35-24. And in Kansas City, Missouri, at least 2 people are dead. A dozen people may have been injured in a shooting outside a bar. I'm John Trout.
Welcome back to this special Martin Luther King edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. I'm Nathan Hager. We're going to wrap up the hour now with a look at the economy and what may be in store for the Federal Reserve in 2020. Joining us to help us do that, Yelena Shulyetcheva, senior U.S. economist for Bloomberg Economics, along with Andrew Husby, an economist covering the U.S. and Canada for Bloomberg Economics. Nice to have you both with us. So let's take a look at what we know so far in these first couple of weeks of 2020. We've had a weaker than expected December jobs report. We got a phase 1 trade deal signed with China. Yelena, I'll start with you. How does this set us up for the outlook for 2020?
Well, that actually tells us that 2020 will probably be in line with our expectations for more modest growth than we saw back in 2019. So this would be in line with decelerating growth in personal income growth and personal spending, but consumers will continue to be the key engine of economic growth.
And Andrew, in terms of the consumer, we got retail sales figures that came in pretty good as well. Is that your view as well, that we're on a slower but still growing path?
Sure. Well, it's certainly an upbeat report for that month, but it's in comparison to a pretty weak set of results the year prior. So some of the strength that you'll see touted in various, whether it's in individual companies or in the month itself, it's in comparison to a very weak base. So I think we'd be more focused on the general trend in consumer income, which has been moderating. We kind of sidestepped into the end of the year. And basically the key will be to see whether that momentum shows signs of picking up, whether it's based on labor income or sentiment in the first part of the year.
When you talk about moderating wage growth, Yelena, the big question that's been surrounding this economy for some time is, where's inflation? How do you see inflation moving forward into 2020?
I don't see much inflation moving forward, and I think it will continue to move sideways, but certainly we are not talking about significant acceleration in inflationary pressures. So one of the big culprits behind it is deceleration, or should we even say declines in prices for goods because of the strength in the currency. So strong dollar is significantly weighing on inflation in the goods sector. Meanwhile, services prices are not really accelerating to such a degree that should be reflecting the tight labor market that we have seen as of late. I think 2020 will see some further modest acceleration in wage pressures, but that will not necessarily result in something that will probably spook the Fed and make them hike rates. That is certainly not on the radar.
Yeah, we've talked to a number of analysts who say that the bar for the Fed to raise rates is pretty high now. What do you see potentially changing the Fed's view if we get to that material reassessment of the outlook that the central bank has talked about? I'll put that question to you, Andrew.
Yeah, I think basically the momentum in the Fed policy view is going to be tough to shake this year. The bar to a hike, I think regardless of, you don't want to say regardless of what we see, but even if we see a pickup in, say, wage growth, if we see a pickup in investment, these are things the Fed has been looking for some time, and we'll actually be expecting some of that because of the declines in rate cuts that they've instituted so far last year. So I think they do expect some strength. The baseline view of the Fed is pretty strong, 2% growth, and they won't view this as something they'll need to tamp down again. So the bar to a hike is very high this year. Bar to a cut is actually probably a bit lower. We'll see how the inflation numbers come out.
Before they even consider any move in policy, they will be very, very cautious about that, because the bar in an election year for the Fed, for the central bank, is very, very high for them to act. If you look at the history of central bank actions during election years, you will see that they don't usually change the direction, the course of policy. They might still make adjustments. So, for example, if they were tightening policy, they will continue tightening policy, or if they were on a pause, they will continue to do nothing in terms of rate increases or declines. But the bottom line here is that they will be very, very cautious in an election year to change the course of policy going forward.
Does that take data dependence off the table then when you have an election year factoring in, Andrew?
It's certainly not something they'll ever admit to saying is off the table. You saw a little of this out of the Dallas Fed's Kaplan last week. He did say that he'd like to think that if it got to the point where policy need to be adjusted to the upside, he would consider it. But you could tell there will be quite a bit of reluctance to move in that direction.
What do you see potentially shifting the Fed's view in an election year, Yelena? Is there anything that could?
Something external, something extraordinary happening. We did see the signing of the historical huge trade agreement last week, but will it hold? We don't know. So there are a lot of different conditions that have to be met for that to go through as planned and for both sides to really deliver on their promises. So any de-escalation is positive, but if we see re-escalation of trade tensions this year, that could negatively impact the outlook and certainly, push the Fed's hand if needed.
What impact do you see the Phase 1 trade deal having on the economy short term, Andrew?
Certainly the main channel we've been looking at is the impact on confidence. One of the key missing ingredients in growth in the latter part of 2019, as some of these tensions became more pronounced, was this reduction in business investment. There have been a number of special factors in manufacturing, and then those we do think kind of continue under the surface. There will be the Boeing production halt in the first quarter, which will have a measurable impact on growth. But I think underneath that, there will be some sense, as long as the Phase 1 agreement does look like it's on track and being implemented, at least to a reasonable degree, there will be some marginal lift of corporate sentiment, corporate basically decision-making that favors more investment. Now, one of the key factors we'll still need to monitor on that front is whether corporate profits and basically other factors like global demand, corporate profits are also picking up, because we view those as a more stable prerequisite and factor driving business investment, not necessarily the trade deal on its own.
One thing we haven't seen much in the economy or the markets is impact of politics. Do you expect that to change, though, in an election year and when we have an impeachment trial coming up? I'll put that question to you, Yelena.
Well, I think these things could affect consumer sentiment and confidence to a certain degree, but they are unlikely to be reflected in a broader categories of consumer spending necessarily. So that really depends on the strength in the labor market. And as long as we see continued increases in in job creation and potentially declines in the unemployment rate, consumers will remain happy enough to continue spending, and probably at an increased pace towards the second half of the year.
What do you see as potential headwinds, Andrew, for this expansion?
It's certainly on the global front, that picture has not fully resolved. There are various Europe, Asia has been decelerating, but is maybe stabilizing, maybe picking up. Some of this will depend on, once again, we circle back to the trade deal. But you do see lower structural growth around the world. And I think one assumption is that we get this massive pickup in demand as these uncertainties subside. But we have to remember that beneath the surface, growth rates are slow around the world for a number of reasons, including demographics, including aging populations, including also structural issues within various economies that may or may not promote investment. So I think that's going to be something that we'll be looking at. It's certainly something that's underlying the political environment in many countries. So I think that's something to watch very closely this year.
Well, it has to be said that thus far the U.S. has remained pretty insulated from contractions in the global economy. Can that continue, Yelena?
I think so, as long as the consumer remains the main driving force behind the economy. But there are certain risks, both to the upside and to the downside. Andrew mentioned business investment as a wild card that could potentially be a risk to the upside. Another thing that the administration is kind of hoping to achieve with this latest trade deal, for example, is to make sure that trade deficit actually becomes smaller. And by doing that, they can actually increase the contribution from the external sector of the economy. But that will significantly depend on global growth and the ability and willingness of other countries to purchase U.S. goods. So the latest trade deal is actually looking for a significant revamp of exports to China of U.S. products in manufacturing, energy, agriculture. But will they be able to purchase as much from us? That's a big question. So it's really, the performance of the external sector will depend on ability of other countries to really participate.
Yelena Shulyacheva and Andrew Husby of Bloomberg Economics. Thanks to both of you for joining us on this holiday edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. And thanks to you as well for listening. We invite you to join us tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. Wall Street time for Bloomberg Daybreak. We'll speak live with Matt Maley, equity strategist at Miller Tabak. Right now, it's 57 minutes past the hour. I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Run, run. Mix it up. Skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run, lift. Splash. Skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run, mix it out of boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing until March. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run.
Mix it. Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see three men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
Heroes. They're the ones we turn to in our darkest hour. Like when you blow a fuse and the lights go off. Whether it's electrics to heating, plumbing to plastering, at Local Heroes, every job completed by an expert tradesperson comes with a 12-month British Gas guarantee when you pay online. So, if it needs fixing, there's a local hero for that. To get a quote, search Local Heroes. Terms and conditions apply.
Along the goal line, Martin scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, hit a shot, he scores!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now a global news update.
Schiff complaint, bracing for violence. I'm John Trout.
If the Senate decides, if Senator McConnell prevails, and there are no witnesses, it will be the first impeachment trial in history that goes to conclusion without witnesses.
Democratic Representative Adam Schiff is accusing U.S. intelligence agencies of withholding documents from Congress on Ukraine that could be significant to President Trump's impeachment trial getting underway tomorrow. State officials warning about the potential for violence ahead of today's gun rights rally in Virginia's state capitol. Correspondent Nick Valencia.
A source in the Virginia State Police Department tells me that over the course of the weekend, there was an increase in threats on law enforcement, specifically on the social media pages of the Richmond Police Department as well as the Virginia State Police. But there are some individuals, pro-gun rights individuals, who are expected to attend that are no longer because they fear something bad could happen.
The San Francisco 49ers are in the Super Bowl for the first time in 7 years after cruising to a 37-20 win over the Green Bay Packers. The 49ers will play the Kansas City Chiefs, who beat the Tennessee Titans 35-24. Actor Robert De Niro was saluted with a Lifetime Achievement Award from his acting peers yesterday, but used the occasion to take a veiled jab at Washington politics.
There's right and there's wrong, and there's common sense and there's abuse of power. And as a citizen, I have as much right as anybody, an actor, an athlete, a musician, anybody else, to voice my opinion. And if I have a bigger voice because of my situation, I'm going to use it whenever I see a blatant abuse of power.
The Iranian official leading the investigation into the shoot-down of a Ukrainian jetliner says no decision's been made to release the flight recorders. That comes a day after he was quoted as saying they would be sent to Ukraine. I'm John Trout.
Here is some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or if you sign up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare. It's the affordable alternative to health insurance, and it's worked beautifully for 25 years. They have more than 400,000 members now around the country. MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing ministry, and over the years, members have shared over $3 billion of each other's medical bills, so they could help share your needs too. And best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. You're not stuck with a high-cost health plan. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. Here's the number to find out more, and there's no pressure. They are super easy to talk to. Call 844-91-BIBLE. That's 844-91-BIBLE. 844-91-BIBLE.
Famed attorney Alan Dershowitz appeared on multiple Sunday shows to talk about being a member of President Trump's impeachment defense team.
There is a confusion between the reasons for having impeachment, and those include we don't want to see presidents who are dishonest, we don't want to see presidents who abuse their power. That's all true. But then when it comes to coming up with the criteria for impeachment, we don't use terms like dishonesty or abuse or maladministration or malpractice. We have to focus in on specific criteria to avoid weaponization of impeachment.
Attorney at law Dershowitz on CNN's State of the Union. The 2020 census in the U.S. will begin this week in a tiny community in Alaska. It has started in rural Alaska ever since the U.S. purchased the territory from Russia in 1867. At last count, the population of Tuksuk was 661. I'm John Trout.
And I'm Mark Mills in the Bloomberg Radio Newsroom. This newscast is brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Their margin loans start at 3.06% and decrease for larger loan values. Rates subject to change. Learn more at ibkr.com/compare. U.S. financial markets are closed for the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. European stocks declined. Asia shares finished mixed. And S&P 500 futures have drifted lower as investors look ahead to more corporate earnings and some key central bank meetings this week. We'll update the numbers in a moment. Iran's 6-year push to integrate with the global economy appears to be coming to an end. On Monday, Iran threatened to withdraw from its last remaining commitments to the 2015 deal that limited its nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of international sanctions. On the same day, Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif pulled out of this week's World Economic Forum in Davos. Thousands gathered in cities across the country Saturday as part of the nationwide Women's March rallies focused on issues such as climate change, pay equity, reproductive rights, and immigration. Crowds were noticeably smaller than in previous years. For the first time, the New York City Women's March addressed the importance of money and female financial independence. One of the speakers was Ellevest founder Sally Krawcheck.
Nothing bad happens when women have more money. It is good for women, it is good for men, it is good for the economy, it is good for society, it's good for all of us. Thank you.
In mid-morning trading in the European markets, the FTSE 100 in London is down about 0.4%. The DAX in Germany is little changed. The CAC 40 in Paris down 0.33%. Overnight, the Nikkei closed up 0.2%. The Hang Seng in Hong Kong down 0.9%. And the CSI 300 in China gained 0.75% in Monday trading. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Mark Mills. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Best.
Bloomberg Best is about the insight and the context that we get from our guests.
It's a great way to catch up on some of the stories you might have missed on the Bloomberg.
Stories you're not going to find in any other news organization.
Bloomberg Best. Bloomberg's best stories of the week. Powered by 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries around the world.
I'm Denise Pellegrini, and on this edition of Bloomberg Best, former Fed Chair Alan Greenspan on entitlement spending.
We've got to resolve this issue.
The euro.
I was wrong.
And on what was in the briefcase.
My wife prepared my lunch.
Bloomberg surveillance host Tom Keene sat down with Greenspan, and he began by asking him about the consequences of an aging society.
Well, that's the most critical issue to determining our future. Because if you observe what happens as people age, 100 years ago, they never retired. They just worked until the end. Now retirement has become a very significant element, not only for the individuals, but a number, obviously, is heavily involved in health care, and Social Security is paying. All sorts of entitlements are involved, and they're growing very rapidly because our average, I guess the average age expectancy of, say, the American public has changed very dramatically, and is changing such that we're seeing as the critical economic forces now the fact that Social Security benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, are statistically very obviously crowding out gross domestic savings in the United States. And gross domestic savings is a major area of funding gross domestic investment. And investment is basically the base of, I would say, most every other aspect of growth you can think of. Very specifically, it's heavily involved in anybody who's doing any forecasting.
Americans all, and frankly around the world, all understand this. They understand it's a changing America. Ned Phelps, the laureate of Columbia, talks about dynamism, the vitality that's out there. What is the solution to what seems to be an older America, and a solution to a more stagnant economic growth that comes from it?
The problem is that the solutions are so politically difficult that very few people even want to raise the issue. If you look at what the data we're dealing with is, it's a very major. Well, first of all, go back. Remember, the Social Security Administration occurred in well before World War II, but the payments didn't begin until, and they've now become extraordinarily large and rising. And the Office of Management and Budget projections, which are almost mechanical by using the growing population of the elderly, they're getting huge increases in the need for finding funding for social benefits. And the problem basically that we're looking at in the future is if we really extend the system, it says productivity would have to slow down, or we find alternate means of funding. And there are alternate means. Sweden went through very much this issue a decade or two ago. And they switched from defined benefit programs to defined contribution programs for all of their various elements of welfare, and that had a dramatic effect because it was self-financing. And if that doesn't occur, we're going to find very severe budget problems.
You and your generation were able to provide leadership on these key entitlement issues by setting up bipartisan committees, trying to pull away from the politics of the moment to come to a set of solutions that politicians could say, well, we're going to do it because Greenspan and the rest of them say we can do that. Can we do the committees, the bipartisan efforts now in this polarized Washington?
Well, remember, I ran a Social Security Commission in 1983. The simple issue of changing the age. This is 1983. We wanted to change the age by several years, And we ended up finally getting it okayed, effective 1998 or something like
10, 15 years out. Yeah.
I've forgotten the exact date, but it's not that far out. But it was very substantial, beyond. I was thinking in terms of 6 months.
Right, and they were thinking in terms of 60 years.
Because that's the only way they could get political adjustment.
I want to, looking at your recent work of looking at an aging America and greater use of the medical system and such, and then moving over to a dearth of savings, and then moving over to a lack of investment from that. I want to focus on savings, and that the crutch for decades has been let the foreigners come in and assist us in our lack of savings. Do we risk in the new turmoil and the new globalization seeing foreigners walk away from investment in U.S. securities?
That is a very good question. I'm not sure I would know the answer to that, nor does anybody really know the answer.
Bloomberg's Tom Keene with Alan Greenspan. And coming up, the former Fed chair's concern about a drop in productivity. If you have a Bloomberg terminal, you can see all the Bloomberg Best stories at Best Go. You're listening to Bloomberg Best.
Vattel Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
With the Bloomberg Small Business Report, I'm John Tucker, brought to you by Dell Small Business. If your small business is selling online, you know shoppers can't pick up or try things on. All they have are the online photos of your product. And when it comes to those pictures, it might be best to leave that to the professionals or to the robot. Square, the company that sells touchscreen cash registers and small business loans, is trying a new product photography service. The company will begin taking orders from anyone in the U.S. for mechanically snapped photos. It'll charge about $10 plus shipping for customers to send a product weighing less than 20 pounds to a Brooklyn studio, and within 2 weeks, receive 3 digital photos from different angles. The Square Photo Studio consists of a white table, lots of bright lights on tripods, and a robotic arm with a high-end camera fixed to the end. The arm swings with precision to different angles and snaps away using a mechanical figure on the shutter release. And that's the Bloomberg Small Business Report.
Rich, please.
Why book with Sunhat Villas? Take over 200 sea view spots, over 350 places at the heart of the destination, over 400 villas just a short walk to the beach, and even more countryside retreats. Add in 1 to 10 bedroom options, 19 years of experience, and 5-star reviews. And you'll find countless reasons to make Sunhat your number one. Search Sunhat Villas, apt to protected.
Welcome to Nuffield Health Battersea, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a wide range of equipment and classes, and our expert team will support you to get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Run. Mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift, mix it up, lift, mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time, skip, mix it up, run, mix it out of boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing until March. T's and C's apply. Run. Makes it hard. Skip. Makes it run. Makes it.
Hard Megxit or soft Megxit? Have Harry and Meghan misjudged public feeling? And what does their departure mean for the future of the monarchy? With questions mounting, turn to The Telegraph for answers. Subscribe today at telegraph.co.uk.
Pellegrini. We continue our conversation with Alan Greenspan. Bloomberg surveillance host Tom Keene asked the former Fed chair if he's worried about U.S. economic progress coming undone.
We've got to resolve this issue. If we don't, we're going to have some very severe problems with our budget because it implies an ever rapidly growing social investment system at somebody else's expense. And the question, who in the committees of the Congress as they stand now, or in the White House or elsewhere, are going to make the types of judgments, for example, which the new Sweden government made, I think it's 1990s or something. It was a dramatic, major shift. They had to, because if they didn't, the system would fall apart. We are already at a turning point that unless and until we now start to make major changes in our costs and benefits, our productivity growth rate will slow down below where it is now, which is 1% a year. We're trying to spend more than we have. Sweden made the decision that they were going to spend only what they had, but it took 500% interest rate.
I want to talk about the underlying theories of the moment. I know you don't speak about monetary policy per se. You've always been very good about that since you've left as chairman. But I must ask a fiscal question. We have the heritage of a generation of Volcker, Greenspan, Pete Peterson, Paul Tsongas, and others that have told us that someday there will be trillion-dollar deficits. They are upon us right now. What is the Greenspan prescription to help our grandchildren and indeed your great-grandchildren with this conundrum?
First is to address the source of the problem. And the source of the problem is that we have a defined benefit program for Social Security and, in fact, for pretty much everything else. What we need to do is to go to a defined contribution program, which is the 401k is all we have. That will put a damper on where our major problem lies. And if we can resolve that, we have a good shot at resolving other issues. I mean, the other issues are such things as funding. I'm arguing for a higher rate of all sorts of financial changes in the system, which would effectively tend to make the system somewhat better. The chances of those occurring zero.
I've got one more question on this before we get to the monetary theories at hand, and that is your good friend Roger Ferguson at TIAA-CREF has provided real leadership about thinking now about what to do about America's failed retirement system. We went with ERISA in 1974 to a defined contribution plan. Has it been successful? And if not, what do we do to get America's retirement system more productive and better?
It's a political issue. In other words, it's a question of essentially taking benefits away from some and increasing taxes on others. And that is a very difficult task. Roger is an ideal person to be working on that. I worked with him for years. He was vice chair when I was chair for a good long. And it's doable. We were doing things that can be done provided the political system holds together. And I've seen no evidence of its holding together for these tough problems.
Let me turn now to monetary theory, and I want to begin with a theory of the verbal. David Leonhardt writing, Greenspan, mumbling with great incoherence. You had such a way of communicating the message in your own unique way. We've gone anti-Greenspan now to an era of almost over-communication, many would say. Is there too much Fed speak?
Of course. The very definition of Fed speak is it shouldn't exist, period. It's a foreign language to everybody other than the Fed, and it's undecipherable language when it gets to Fed people. And it's meant as a joke, but not wholly.
Mm-hmm. If I look at the parameters that we deal with at Bloomberg every day, we have risk where we can establish probabilities, this wonderful thing, uncertainty. I think of the great Peter Bernstein here writing about this, or even Douglas North and this strange thing, ambiguity. With all of our communication and with all of our different voices, do we risk having almost too many messages and that versus a more cohesive message as we saw in your era?
No, not necessarily. I think the more that people talk about it and interact, the more likely you'll get a consensus in the political system. Our problems is not what to do. We know what to do. We do what the Swedes did. But if you take a look at what the various different things that they did to resolve their problems with exactly the same problem we have now, you would say, no way that goes on in the United States.
Can the United States of America be held equivalent to Sweden? Is there, with our diversity and with our scope and size of 4 time zones, how can we be equated with Sweden?
I grant there are major differences. The principles are the same. Mm-hmm. Defined benefit versus defined contribution. Those are accounting issues, and they stipulate basically that you can't spend, for defined contributions, you cannot spend more than you've brought in. If you could arrange to do that in the United States, that would do wonders to our current position, our $1 trillion deficit, as well as the future. I'm hesitant to believe that we're able to do that, and I'd like to see that we can do it, but until we do it, I'm concerned about the future.
You've been listening to former Fed Chair Alan Greenspan speaking with Bloomberg surveillance host Tom Keene. And coming up, Greenspan, the Reagan Republican, on his favorite politician. He says the one he liked the most was a New York Democrat. If you have a Bloomberg terminal, you can see all the Bloomberg Best stories at Best Go. You're listening to Bloomberg Best.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or